So welcome to the May 18th, 2021 Planning Board meeting. The first item on the agenda is roll call, and all 7 members of the Planning Board are here tonight. The next is approval of the minutes of the April 20, 2021 meeting. Any corrections or comments regarding, Jason?
I think it was the first thing. Asked if it is 5 acres or less than 5 acres, greater than 5 acres.
What page are you on, so Christina can you tell?
Well,
first
the
item.
issue is just as amended, I think. Mr. Record moved to accept the minutes as provided, but it should be as amended because of that less than or greater than 5 acres. Is that right?
We were not able to correct the minutes. What we found was a mistake in what was approved that now has to be corrected and is on your agenda tonight. So I couldn't change the minutes because that's what was voted on and accepted.
Oh, I see. Yep.
But we did catch the error because of that, and it's on your agenda tonight to be fixed in the ordinance.
The last item.
Okay,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
all right, so we don't need to amend the minutes until later, until,
Anyone else found any?
yeah. Any other, Ann?
Okay, page 11. Page 11I, you need to bold the findings of fact. So, that's all.
Josh?
To the easy one, well, I'll start. Page 5, about halfway down in the paragraph that starts Catherine Papke via Zoom Friar Lane, asked if Middle Road said that there are wetlands running up and down Friar Lane. I don't believe Middle Road said anything during the meeting. I did watch the video. And then on page 13, Q is misspelled. I don't know exactly without. Oop. It's in the third line down from the top, towards the end, and it is in Q at DEP. It's just misspelled.
Any others? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
Second?
Bill, second. All those in favor? Right, one person was not here last time. Thank you. The next item is a staff site plan approval and for expansion of 8 portable classrooms to 10. And I'll ask Carla if she has any comments that you would like to make.
The MSAD found that they needed additional classroom space, so they're taking the cluster of portables that they have currently behind the Mabel I. Wilson School and adding a different kind of structure that will net them 2 more classrooms.
All right, thank you. And I think a building, at the end, it says something about a building permit is required before they do
Correct,
that, I
yep.
guess. Okay, thank you. The first agenda item, and we apologize for the slight delay. It's a technical Zoom issue as happened before. Yes, I'm sorry.
I have a couple questions for
Yeah.
Carla.
Okay. go ahead.
Just in general, two kind of more general questions than about this specific project. The prior portables, I mean, we've gone from 0 to however many to 10 now. Were those all done in site plan, and is there anything that ever says, you know, you can do, in other words, if somebody came, if the school came to us and said we had to do 10 portable classrooms in one fell swoop, that would not qualify, I don't believe. It would be over what is allowed for staff.
It's
approval.
based on the square footage for the site plan ordinance.
Right. And I believe if they came and did all 10 at once.
They'd probably be over it.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there any sort of, if you wanted to do a big project, could you just iteratively every year come and do a little piece of it and go through staff site plan?
It's potentially possible, but I don't think many, how do I
No,
put
just-
this? Real developers would do that because of the expense.
And I
involved.
don't think they did it on purpose in this,
Yeah.
it's just a
No, I
question.
think their enrollment projections are a moving target all the time, and
Right, well, and we don't need to add portables just to sit there and, I mean, they're paying rent on them. So I don't have a problem with the process, it just seems like it could be an issue at some
It's
point.
not happened yet that people have done
Um,
it that way.
And then is site plan similar to subdivision, such that it's on the plan now, and if next year they want to remove those portables because they don't need them, do they have to come back and get approval to remove them?
That is an interesting question. I don't think I would have ever thought to have them do that, but
Just something to think about.
it is something to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's great that they came to the board before they did it.
Yeah, this,
So, agenda item number 1, a public hearing for a sketch plan review for a 3-lot major subdivision called Ross Estates on a 12.41 acre parcel located on Blanchard Road Extension. Tax assessor map R08, lot 68I in the RR2 zoning district. Applicant owner, Stonewood Land LLC, represented by Kevin Clark, PLS Sightline Civil Engineers and Surveyors. And I believe Mr. Clark is ready on the Zoom call. If you are, we'll listen.
Good evening, Kevin Clark from Sightlines. Hope you can you hear me okay?
A little louder, maybe?
All right, I will do my best here. Let me just move the microphone too. Maybe if I relocate that, is that a little better?
It is. Everybody good out there?
Okay, great. Good evening. I'm here representing Stonewood Land LLC and Nate Ross, who is a local builder who has purchased the property and intends to subdivide 3 lots. As you said, it's 12.41 acres in the RR2 zone. Has a minimum 2-acre lot size, 200 feet of frontage, and we're proposing 3-lot subdivision. The lots would all have private water and septic. They would also preserve the existing trail system, and we're avoiding the environmental features such as wetlands, streams, and a vernal pool to the greatest extent possible. At our last meeting, we met with you folks for a pre-application workshop, which I believe is part of the new ordinance requirements. I think you're maybe doing some housekeeping regarding that later this evening. And at that meeting, the planning board chose the conservation option versus the traditional option, which was despite the applicant's preference. And he did ask if there was any recourse to readdress that issue or look at that in a glance at that traditional, or is that a binding vote in a workshop? The workshop is sort of, the workshop status stage is a bit unfamiliar to us at this point.
Well, our preference certainly was the conservation type subdivision. In terms of whether it's a binding vote or not, I will look to Carla and/or our attorney.
I believe it is binding because the steps for major subdivision in the RR1 or RR2 start with first starts with the applicant meeting with the code officer and myself, and then the next step is the planning board workshop, and the sole purpose of the workshop is really to compare a traditional versus a conservation, with the idea that the town's very much preferring the conservation option. In fact, that the town planning board did pick that at that meeting. They would have to go back to that step,
Yeah.
which they could do next
Understood. We
month.
just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Carla.
Just to play devil's advocate, there was an overlap in the process, right? We had the workshop, the original workshop, and then we kind of had the preliminary review, so there's 2 steps. But we approved the last meeting, we approved what we did in the initial workshop, right? Sort of just said again that we did it, so.
Well, that was the other subdivision. That was the 14-lot subdivision last month that we had to do what we're doing tonight, which is kind of reaffirm what happened in the planning board workshop.
We did vote on this one, I remember. I think it was close, 4-3, as I recall.
Right.
But it was 4-3, that
Yeah.
it'd be conservation.
But So technically, if somebody wanted to make a motion for reconsideration in the majority, they could. But then after this meeting, the issue would be dead.
Well, I presume then I don't know if that's, I don't
would have
know that
happened.
that's part of the process. Then would vote again, and I presume it would be 4-3 again, so.
Just to answer his
Yeah.
question, to be completely,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we wrote that into the ordinance in terms of the resolution of the challenge, as I recall.
Well, no, I think they'd have to go back to the workshop. You couldn't have a
Okay.
reconsideration of the vote here tonight, I don't think. I don't think legally
So
that's.
Kevin, could you hear all that, or do you
I know,
accept?
I did hear that, and that was my understanding. I wanted to clarify that because
Understood.
the process seems a little convoluted where we did a workshop, take a vote, and then we go to a sketch plan. But I understand you guys are working on your ordinance right now as well, so that may be an item that's going to be addressed.
It
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, the ordinance has been finalized.
Very good. So what I'll do now is I'd like to share my screen and I'll move on to our plan and just go over some of the features. We made some minor changes to it since the last meeting. Okay.
Excuse me,
Is
is
that
that going out
visible?
over Channel 2?
That's what I was just asking Christina. Is this
Hold
going?
on 1 second.
Sure thing.
Use that screen for the person that's displaying at the podium, and we use this screen for the Zoom.
It is, but is it going out on, not Zoom, is it going out on Channel 2?
It should be.
Do you want me to try
Okay.
to turn that television on?
Yeah.
I think that's what Bill Shane does. Is
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
broadcasting.
Okay, thank you.
All right then. So, moving forward now, we prepared the conservation style subdivision plan for the next level with the revisions. As you can see, we added, in addition to the 75-foot buffer around the perimeter, we added open space around the perimeter that equals 6.39 acres of open space. There would be 3 lots, which we had to modify those so that they gain frontage on this private right-of-way that's coming off from Blanchard Road extension. We did submit road names, one of which has been approved, one was declined as being too close to another name, so we are resubmitting for another road name. And we'll have those straightened out before we go to final. So we have 3 lots. One has frontage and a long neck to the building window, which meets the setbacks from the vernal pool, 75-foot buffer from the perimeter, and also a setback from a stream. Then we have another one that also falls within the larger buffer area of the vernal pool, which will require a permit by rule, but it also meets the setbacks from streams and the 100-foot setback from the vernal pool. And then the third lot has the 75-foot buffer. It has some wetlands that will need to be crossed, but then it meets the setbacks from the streams and the property line. We've provided a maximum of 1.90 to 1.95 acres on those 3 lots, where the minimum lot size computed after dividing the gross area by the maximum number of lots came out to 1.1, so we're slightly above that. And as you can see, we also enlarged the width of the open space adjacent to the open space on the on the other project. So I think those really address the significant changes since the last meeting. Here's one trail here. I think, it'll probably need to be skirted around this building window and lot. And the same over here, the existing trail moved outside of the building window. But we intend to maintain those connections as requested. And I'd be happy to answer questions from the board if they have any on this revised plan.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. Questions from the board? None at this time. Sorry, Jason.
Do I remember right, you were agreeable to working with the Trails Committee for putting some trails through the conservation area, is that right, regardless of who owned it?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any others? I will then open the public hearing and start, I guess John will identify himself and let us know what the commission thinks.
Good evening, John Jensenyas, Vice Chair of the Lands and Conservation Commission. Overall, the Lands and Conservation Commission thinks the developer is proposing a reasonable development plan for the subdivision. As Kevin indicated, the property does have 2 existing trails, and as currently plotted, those trails do cross both open space and private property. We did have some concerns that they were going across private property, and we're glad to hear that Kevin said they were looking at making some changes, but keeping those trails open. It's worth noting that the open space in the 5 subdivisions or proposed subdivisions in that area could provide a nice trail system for residents. However, private open space ownership can create challenges for establishing trails. Therefore, we'd like the developers to consider offering the town either the open space or a public easement for the open space. Also going forward, the Lands and Conservation Commission is interested in ensuring that the open space has an acceptable forest management plan. That's it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So the public hearing is still open, and we'll wait a minute to see if anybody's queuing up. Let me know, Whitney, if they are. Is there anyone? Yes, sir. Go ahead if you would like, and while we're waiting. And anybody at home that wants to speak, if you would get in the queue, so Whitney can get to you after we hear this. Yes, sir.
My name's Jeff Kalinich. I live at 371 Blanchard Road Extension, just a little around the corner from this proposed development. And I guess one question I had when I came to the first workshop, it was a minor subdivision, but now it seems to be clearly a major subdivision, so I don't know what that means.
I think it's designated major because a new road is having to be built. If there was a road already there or it didn't have to be extended, it would be a minor subdivision.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my
Okay.
real interest here is the road. I live on the dirt part of the road, kind of where it goes up the other way. But then there's the part that goes to this development, and then there's a part that's shared by both. And I haven't heard anything regarding what standards and I was told that this would be an appropriate time to raise those questions. I'm totally in the dark, and that's very, very interesting to me, because right now there's sections there that are very difficult for 2 cars to pass. So I don't know if
Are you
they're
talking
widening
about
it.
between West Branch and the beginning of the dirt road, or where?
I'm talking between Stonegate and then we divide it into 3 sections. There's a central section we call Section A, and then it takes a Y, and we call what goes down to the proposed development, Section C, and then what goes up the other way to, we call that Section B. And so my question is Section A primarily, because that's the part that where everything's coming together. And so I just was wondering, you know, it's a major, so they're gonna do something to the road, but you know what they're gonna do to the road, when do the people that live and use that road daily get some input on that?
Okay, well, I cannot answer that. I don't know if Carla?
Yes, I can. So where we have been the last couple of months,
You might want to maybe
Sorry.
bring it over as,
it's very awkward to
think. I
turn and
know,
talk
I
at the
know.
same. Where we've been the last few months is really very much pre-process. And the purpose of the meetings we've had to date, including tonight with the sketch plan, is that we've not done any what's called legally substantive review, meaning that we haven't looked at the approval standards that are going to need to be proven for this project to get final approval. The next time they come will be preliminary plan review. That is when they will have all the engineering completed. We will have sent the plans out to the town's engineer to review and give comments back. That's when you could, during that process, before it goes to planning board, you can take a look at what they're proposing. We could meet, you and I, we could meet with the engineer if we needed to, and talk about the road issue specifically. What are they proposing? Does it do what you think it needs to do? And then for the next public hearing, we could really get into the roads and the traffic.
I'm very interested in discussing the standard. I think that's the important
Yep.
piece. I don't really understand the engineering to get it there, but, you know, I've looked at the ordinance and the width and
Right.
stuff, that part, you know,
Yeah.
welcome.
And the change in term from a minor subdivision to a major really doesn't make any difference. We still have to make the exact same findings of fact. It's more a process that there's submission standards that a major subdivision might have to provide that a minor might not. But typically what happens is a developer asks to waive those standards. There are things like the hydrogeologic studies and things like that. So it isn't that the road is getting bigger and that's why it's a major subdivision. It's still going to be the same road regardless.
So could I ask if, Kevin, I presume you heard that. Do you have, you probably don't, but at this time, would you have any comments regarding, looking ahead, regarding the road that was asked about?
And I think Jeff was asking mostly about section A, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I believe there is some agreement already in place where Mr. Ross does need to do some improvements to the width of that section of the roadway.
So we'll, as Carla said, we'll,
And I'm not in tune to the specifics of that, but I know there is an agreement in place for that. And then the other spur C and then the new smaller spur that we're proposing now would just need to meet whatever the minimum town standard is for a private road.
And when you say an agreement is in place, who is the agreement in place?
I believe there was some previous discussions with the town regarding that, and it was prior to my involvement in the property. And I don't know the specifics, but I know that Mr. Ross is intending that he needs to do some improvements to the gravel portion of the road.
yeah, and Kevin, hopefully at the preliminary, we'll have more detail for everyone that lives there regarding the roads.
But is it possible
Yes.
to get involved in discussing the actual standard? I mean, there's paved and there's gravel, and I think that's an important discussion to be a part of. I mean,
Well, I think at the public hearing, at the next public hearing on this project,
that's the
that would be
appropriate time? Okay,
I believe so.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to add that if I'm understanding the situation correctly, the road that you're concerned about is not the actual subdivision road. It's a road leading to where the subdivision road
It's
comes
Chase,
off.
is what Chase owns.
Right. So the
Basically that
planning
section.
board, I don't think is really going to have authority to look at that, but I would be very willing, especially since Kevin talked about something, an agreement with the town, to have the town manager and you and I sit down with the engineer, actually not with the engineer, really, it sounds like it's a town issue. If it's a private road, what are the deficiencies and what, if anything, can the town do to remedy them? And if there's been an agreement between the owner of the subdivision and other people who have this concern, that will happen too. That can happen as well.
Yeah, it's just, it's owned by somebody, it's owned by, I think it's retained by Chase who developed Stonegate,
Yeah.
but there's an association that we pay to maintain it. And so there's different, I'm only one person, I'm not representing the association. I just live there, but I drive it every day.
Right.
So
And I
I
thought-
send you an email and
Yes,
just,
I was going to suggest you reach out to me
then
tomorrow
we'll take care of
with
that.
an email, and we'll
Thank
start
you.
a process.
time.
Thank you very much, Jason.
I think a similar line of discussion we talked about was sort of using that same road to access the conservation area by the public, and the fact that potentially the public wouldn't have the rights to go across this private way. So I think we had sort of touched on that before, and there's some details to work out there
Yeah.
along the same lines.
I agree, yeah.
If I could, on the road issue as well, at the last meeting, there was a question of whether the existing association would be responsible for the new private roadway. And that, my understanding is that the maintenance of the road associated with this project would not fall under, although these people these lot owners would need to be a member of that association, there would have to be an additional road maintenance agreement in place for these three lots that does not fall on the other lot owners along the Blanchard Road extension.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room? The public hearing's still open. So currently, there's nobody in the queue, correct?
Currently, no hands raised.
Okay, we'll wait just a short while longer. Again, if somebody at home wants to make a comment, please do it now before we close the public hearing. Okay, I think at this time I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Are there additional comments or questions? Josh?
Carla, only because I was looking at this for the next subdivision review. 25037G. Walkways shall be provided along all roads within a proposed subdivision. I don't know if that road is within the subdivision or not. So, while you're talking about roads, that may be something we're gonna need some clarity on. It's there to serve that subdivision, but I don't know if it's actually within, in other words, I believe it looks to me like it may be an easement or something across the owner's other property, and so I don't know how, and then the rest of the roads that are in it are driveways, which would not be subject to that. So,
Okay.
I'm not sure what that if that standard would apply or not.
All right, other comments? Yeah, Bill?
John had mentioned the Trails Commission that he would like to see an easement or have it turned over to the town. And I'm not in favor of turning property over to the town for getting it off the tax rolls, and they'd have to maintain it. So I would like us to, I'd prefer we'd go the easement route. Just want to verbalize that.
Yeah, and certainly, I think
There's the same
several of
end.
us would share that. And Kevin, I think we've talked about that before, that would be a real positive, certainly not a mandate, but a real positive if there were such an easement for connecting trails now or in the future.
It ends up with the same ending, but I just prefer the easement.
Well, question, the applicant has to tell us what is going to happen, correct?
Yes.
With that, like, so it isn't, I don't believe it's our decision to give it to the town. The town would have to say, we want it, and
Correct.
if the town were to say that, that's up to the town, not up to the planning board. In other words, if the town for some reason said, we want that, we want to take on that property and control it, then that's a decision at the council level, and they would come to us and say the town
But couldn't
has
you
accepted
preclude it
that.
by making it an easement, and they wouldn't even have to address it?
Making the access
Well,
road?
no, somebody's got to control that. I mean, there may be an easement for the public to use the trails or something, but someone has to own and maintain that.
Correct.
That the conservation area has to be maintained and held by some entity.
Correct.
It could be a trust, it could be the town, it could be, I guess that's about it.
We had a town council ordinance committee, which we talked about this very issue. What is going to be the town council's policy on accepting open space versus letting the homeowners association keep it and maybe allow use of it? And that's the proposal that the next subdivision is going to be doing. They want the homeowners association to hang on to it. Then I got the Conservation Commission's letter, and in that letter, there seemed to be a lot of push that not happen, that the homeowners association not control it, that it be given to the town so that the town has more access and control over it. So we had 3 members of the council there, and the decision was made that they need to have that policy discussion at the council level. Josh is right, it's not something we can make happen one way or the other. The applicant's going to propose a certain thing, and we can choose, does it meet the requirements of the ordinance? Is there a management plan for the conservation land? And is some group, whether it's the private homeowners association, the land trust, or the town of Cumberland, somebody's going to have control of that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other comments? So at this point, for the sketch plan, do we need to vote on?
I think you could reaffirm your decision about it being a
Yeah, I
conservation
think
subdivision.
that seems
Yeah.
reasonable.
Much to Jason's dismay.
Yeah. Does anyone,
Just me?
does anyone have a comment on that point? Is there anyone that objects to anything we heard tonight, that, knowing that it's early in the planning?
What is the are we gonna vote on something to reaffirm the same vote?
No, just that we approve of the sketch plan.
Yeah. This is the same thing as last time, it's like, no,
Right, which
I'm
is
not
why
sure
we-
what
It
we're
is, it
doing,
is.
there is,
The motion-
nobody's disputing it, so it just moves forward,
The
right?
the motion could be something as basic as the planning board received the sketch plan review application and found it to be satisfactory.
Make a motion that we receive the sketch plan review and find it satisfactory.
I second it.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, it is unanimous. Christina. Kevin, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you at
Thank you.
the next stage.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. So the second item is a public hearing for preliminary major subdivision review for a 14-lot, parentheses, 13 home sites, subdivision Blanchard Oaks on a, actually 44.15, I believe, not, we talked about that last time, 44-acre plus parcel located at 365 Blanchard Road Extension, tax assessor map R08, lot 68A, in the Rural Residential 2 zoning district. Applicant owner Chris Axelson, represented by Travis Letelier, PE Northeast Civil Solutions.
Paul?
Yes.
Before you get started, I wasn't here at the last meeting when they came forward for sketch plan review. I was here for the prior workshop where we discussed pretty much the same stuff. I watched the meeting, the video of the meeting, and I've read the minutes. I don't think my absence will affect my ability to hear this, but throw that open, or throw that out to the board. For
Okay,
those.
thank you. And does anybody object to that? Okay, thank you. I think let's vote on that. Is anybody, whoever, I'd like to move that we are in favor of Josh participating in this item. All those in favor? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are on. Unless, Carla, do you have anything before he starts?
Just quickly for the folks watching at home, this
Yeah.
is the first substantive review of a major subdivision. It's a two-step process. There's preliminary plan review and then final plan review. So this application tonight is, I believe they're asking for the preliminary plan approval so they can move on to that second step next month or the month after. They are still awaiting their DEP approval, so it could be
Right.
a while for that.
Okay. All right, you're on. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Jim Fisher with Northeast Civil Solutions. Travis Letelier was here, who's the design engineer for this. He was here on the last couple of meetings. We actually have three different projects going in different towns this evening, so I have...
I should have recognized you. I didn't.
It's quite...
You look familiar.
We've been here before.
Yes.
And last year, just before the stuff hit the fan, as it were. So it's a pleasure to be back toward this end, and it's a pleasure to be back in this venue, actually, which is kind of cool. So this, as Carla mentioned, and as you're all aware, this is a proposal for a 13-house lot subdivision. As you can see, this is off of Blanchard Road extension as well. This is not the private portion of it. This is actually the public portion of it, or the road for that we're looking at right here. Actually comes off of the Blanchard Road extension public area, which comes up to about this section right in here. So what we're looking at here is a dead-end road that's approximately 2,200 square feet, a little bit, excuse me, linear feet, a little bit more than that. That is, which I'll get to here in just a moment, one of the waivers that we're asking for. As you're probably aware, there's a 2,000 linear foot limit typically, but given the rural character of this road, that would be one of the waivers, and again, we'll talk about that here in just a second. I'd like to run through a couple of things. Carla's already touched on a few of them. This is a approximately 44-acre site. We're looking to develop approximately not quite half of that. So this is a conservation subdivision. You can see that all the area that is to the north or to the left of the development as it's oriented, this is all open space. We have no intention of going into this area whatsoever. It's passive recreation. People can certainly walk into it if they wish. We're actually providing a little pathway that comes through this particular area right here that would allow members of the, or homeowners of the development to be able to access that area. This is a vernal pool. These two areas are vernal pools back in here. So as you can see, we're nowhere near, we're not going anywhere near those. It's quite a lovely area. It's mostly wooded. This is the old, terrace and orchards that used to be up here, now a development. So what we're looking for this evening, as Carla mentioned, is preliminary approval. We will obviously be back at least once. We do have an outstanding DEP permit that is, we expect to be able to have that back anytime. The submission for final approval is actually this Friday, I believe. So we're not sure that we're going to actually have that as part of the packet, but it will be coming shortly thereafter, or so we hope. Jeff, I know, is here as well, and he works at the DEP and actually lives in this particular area. So toward that end, we would ask that it's a little bit of patience as far as the DEP's final approval is concerned for that permit. So what we're looking at, again, is 13 house lots that would be private. They are on wells and septics. Electricity obviously is going to be buried. We're looking at a minimal impact of wetland crossings. There's one right here, and then there's one up in this particular area. These are just wetland swales in here. This is actually classified as a stream right through this area. And then this comes down into the Stone Gate and toward the West Branch areas that are on the other side of Blanchard Road. We have the requisite buffers from that, the setbacks, et cetera, so we're not going anywhere near those. Goral Palmer did do the reviewing for us, and they came up with a list of criteria that you probably have before you. We have addressed all of those criteria, and the town has the revised plan set. So they'll certainly be able to take a look at that for the final. We've been able to address every item in there. Some of them were just simply comments, others were suggestions, and obviously we open that when we get to the board's comments. I'd be happy to address anything toward that end. The waivers that we are looking at, just to let you know, would be for identification of trees over 10-inch caliper. This 40-plus acre site is actually fairly wooded. I wouldn't call it old growth necessarily, but it has not been developed. So there's quite a number of forested areas in there. We would like to keep those as much as possible, particularly in the conservation open space area that would be with the homeowners association. And then in addition, so we'd like not to be able to have to identify all those trees, because there's literally a veritable forest of trees in that area, and that would be quite a number toward that end. The high-intensity soils maps and the boundaries, we'd like a waiver of that as well. These lots are ranging from 1 1/4 to about 1 3/4 acres each. So the soils in that particular area, we were also instrumental in doing the West Branch subdivision that's sort of across the street from his. That was about a dozen or so years ago. And the overall soils in that entire area leading all the way down to the river are quite good. So toward that end, everything works. You'll see in your plans that we did have CV and Mahar do the septic plumes for us, and they're rather short, which means indicative of pretty good soils. So toward that end, we would be asking for the waiver of the high-intensity soils report and showing that on the plan. No specific house locations. We actually have submitted 4 of these lots that are that have some of the wetlands that are actually on them. We do have those theoretical house locations and the driveway crossings shown on that. That's with the packets that's just been recently submitted to the town. The rest of them, as is typical in any type of subdivision, we never really know where the houses are going to go. The houses here would be typical. The smallest building envelope within which you could easily get a home would actually support, which is lot 1, would actually support over a 4,000 square foot single-story home. So you can get the idea that the lots themselves are rather large. They don't look it this way because it's a fairly large tract of land overall. But we would like a waiver because we're not really sure what that's going to show, notwithstanding the 4 lots that where we do show them regarding the driveways, and 2 lots that have very small wetland impacts to the driveways to be able to get to the upland areas on the other side of those wetlands. Those wetlands have been included, by the way, in the DEP permit. So there's no issue as far as anything after the fact toward that end. The road length, as I explained before, is capped typically per regulation at about 2,000 linear feet. We'd like to be able to go over that, but not by much. This is a dead-end road. The only people that are ostensibly going to be in here, other than occasional visitors to the homeowners, would be the homeowners themselves. So it's not a particularly large development in that regard, but it does work itself quite well for the conservation subdivision to be able to take advantage of approximately a little bit less than half of this overall property, and then leaving the rest of it completely unscathed, uncut. No byways, we're looking for a waiver of the specific sidewalk. This really doesn't go anywhere down to Blanchard Road. There is no sidewalk along Blanchard Road. Again, there's only 13 house lots that are proposed in here, so the traffic and anybody moving on those roads would be fairly minimal toward that end. And a sidewalk would be impacting more of the land, particularly in the wetland areas, and as far as the stormwater is concerned. And given the quiet nature of the road, we really don't see a particular need for that. This is all before you in writing, by the way. And then the last one would be the curbing. There's typically a requirement for raised granite curbing at the radius where the private road would meet the public road. We're just asking for a waiver for that because there is no curbing from a stormwater perspective on actually Blanchard Road per se and on this road. So it would be sort of a granite curbing radius to and from nowhere that doesn't really serve any purpose. It's not even holding back any of the land. We would like to be able to, just at the upside of the curb, it actually would like to be able to have that be available for the stormwater to be able to flow into the area of the culvert, which is right down in this area. And then that comes underneath Blanchard Road again, and heads down toward the river eventually. All the homes that would be built here would be sprinklered, so there's no issue as far as that's concerned. We also did the dry hydrant on what used to be the Fields property, I don't know who owns it now, which is essentially across the street, and then it's between the access points to Stonewall and Westgate, and that is functioning quite nicely. We did talk to the fire chief about that, and there were no comments toward that end, so that takes care of that. Toward that end, or at this point, I'd like to be able to open this up to address any comments or questions that you might have, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jim. I have one question. My recollection is there was a comment from an engineer regarding Lot 5 with some potential issues. Is that what, this afternoon, we received material very late that I haven't had a chance to look at. Is that part of what you were referring to, that you sent
Yes,
to the town? Okay.
yes, that's one of the 4.
So has an engineer looked at that again and satisfied with the redrawing or whatever was sent?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, but that's
It will
planned?
happen, yeah.
Okay. And your logic for the no walkway is, does West Branch or is it Stone Gate? What's?
Stone, I think it's Stone Wall, I believe, or
Oh,
Stone.
do they have walkways on that side of the, in those developments? Just curious, do you know?
West Branch, I believe, is a partial walkway,
Yeah.
and then a free stripe, and I don't know what's in Stonewall.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back, I think, to another one, but other questions from the board? Anyone? Yeah, Jason?
I have many.
Okay.
We've received lots of comments in this area from neighbors and residents in the area. A lot of concerns about water table, if I recall, and wells and this and that. So I'm hesitant to lean towards waiving anything, really. Specifically, trails, if you could comment on whether you're open to allowing public access to the conservation area. That's one thing. Soils, again, I guess I'm hesitant to waive anything there. The road length, we don't have an answer yet from the fire chief whether he is okay with that. Is that correct?
I have not received one. He's typically not had an issue with something that's just a few hundred feet longer.
Yeah, I personally, that doesn't bother me a lot, but I'd love to see a letter from him that he's happy with the radiuses and the turnarounds and all of that. Byways, I'm definitely in favor of sidewalks, even just for this 13-house development. This is gonna be full of kids in wintertime. I'm a fan of sidewalks, that's, especially with those turns there. Again, the curbing, I mean, that's gonna change the water flow, correct me if I'm wrong. So
No, it doesn't, I'm sorry.
well, I guess I'd like to hear from Dan or Carla on whether that's an issue and if there's any concerns there, again, just because of the sensitivity of other residents in the area, wells and water table and all that. And then, Carla, what does depicting the houses on there, what does that really do for us? And what does that entail, other than plopping a house on the plan?
They're asking for a waiver from that? Depiction of building locations, yeah. I don't even know why we actually have that in our submission requirements. I should think about having that modified, because, as Jim said, people buy a lot depending on the orientation of the garage and everything. Their driveway might be on one side, it might be on the other. What they've done is shown building envelopes, which is all we really need.
What we're used to, yeah.
They can meet the setbacks to fit a house in there.
Yeah, we don't usually have depictions of houses on there, do we? I mean, once the house is
Because
built,
They're
we
asking
do.
for the building locations on the plans.
Within the building envelope.
But we have the envelopes.
That, to me, that would be important.
Okay, and your thoughts on the trails for public use?
We certainly don't have a problem in theory as far as members of the public being able to use a trail system. It's kind of cool that way, actually, especially in an open conservation area like that. The issue is, which you sort of discussed with the last project, is who is actually going to be responsible for it. If it's the homeowners association, then it typically gets limited to those people within that association as far as its use is concerned. If it's open to the public at large, then usually it's a town issue, primarily because you're now opening it up to liability. And also, people who don't live there don't necessarily treat it the way the people who do live there might do that. So we're not adverse to that, but it really depends on whether or not this is going to be open specifically to the members of the homeowners association only, or whether the town is actively going to get involved with maintaining it and responsibility for any liabilities that are in there.
Yep, I'm sure the public would love to have access to it at the minimum via an easement. But
That's fine.
okay, thank you.
Josh?
Carla, normally did CV Mahar do who was the town's engineer that reviewed it?
For this project, it's up there, Al Palmer, who's actually here this evening. Goral Palmer.
Sorry, Al. Often we get sort of the engineer's opinion on the waivers, like
Yeah.
high-intensity soils. I think that would be helpful. I'll generally, I mean, the 10-inch trees, we pretty much waive whenever anybody asks for it. The building locations, I'm fine with that. I'd like to hear from the fire chief on the dead end, but I have nothing. I'm okay with it as long as he's okay with it, I'm sure. The byway, I'd echo Jason's issue. I might be open to some flexibility, but there's some tight curves. I'd be slightly wary of not having anything and having kids riding bikes and walking. But I will listen to the applicant, certainly. Carla, I've got some questions for you in the findings. You want to just go through those now so we don't go through it when we're doing it, or do you want to do it when we...
Up to the board, how they would like to do it.
And there's nothing too super significant, it's just clarification.
I think I'd prefer now. You do it now, Josh.
6, sewage disposal. A preliminary soil test was conducted on April 22nd, 2021. The report dated March 26, 2021. So there were 2 reports, or is that a... That seems like strange that they would have a March 26th report and then a preliminary soil test on April 22nd.
I'm not sure. Jim, you're probably not familiar with this either, because
I think
it's
it
in.
was the-
A lot of this is just to get it cleaned up for final, so that we know.
Okay.
You have an ACE in there somewhere, a 3-letter acronym of ACE.
Oh, Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you. I think that may be it. There's a typo in nothing. Okay,
Okay.
that's all I got.
Okay.
The commitment, the financing capacity.
Right.
There are a couple comments about it not being sufficient. Have you had a discussion with the applicant as to what would be sufficient?
Yeah, I actually put a draft proposed condition of approval that addresses what we're going to need for that. I believe we did that.
Well, it's an updated letter of commitment for financing.
Yep.
This is, to my knowledge, this is the first one I remember seeing that was sort of private finance, not from a bank. So are we okay if they say the exact same thing as a normal bank commitment letter? Again, I'm okay with it. I'm honestly fairly okay with the one that went in.
Yeah. So
Bank commitment letters don't ever say they're actually going to give them money. They
right,
just-
we've gotten away from formal commitment letters over the years since the banking industry changed on that. I think what the planning board has to remember is that The concern that the town has is that the project be left incomplete. So what we're going to have, and this will be based on their ability to get financing, is going to be a performance guarantee.
Right.
So I.
Right,
we'll-
so
we'll
as
get a
long as,
little
I
more.
mean, I guess that would be my
Okay.
preference as well, is that there's money there to complete what gets started.
Right.
If something happens, not, a commitment letter.
Yeah.
In terms of, we'll provide the total financing, something that backstops the project if it, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Anyone else? Amanda?
Briefly, do you mind repeating, please, the reasoning for the soils waiver? You were going on kind of fast once you got into
Sure.
your rhythm there. My understanding is that you said it's related to testing that had been done, satisfactory testing that had been done in an adjacent area. Is that correct?
Yes, the overall area. What happens is there are different caliber levels, as it were, of soils testing, primarily to take a look at how viable they are, not just for test pits for private septic, but to make sure that they are not really loose soils, or that you're trying to build in a wetland, for instance, or something to that effect. These particular soils are on a slope, not a particularly steep slope, so there's not a whole lot of wetlands, notwithstanding the areas right around the drainage areas. And what I was explaining earlier is that if you have relatively poor soils, then it's not bad to be able to have a high-intensity soils map, which is actually a grid system that a soil scientist would go out and establish usually by hand, with a hand auger, to determine the caliber of the soils, and then maps those soils, and we actually put them onto each one of these maps. And those would primarily be if we're looking at putting houses very, very close to low wetlands, marshes, for instance, or if there's a great deal of exposed rock, which typically means that there's a lot of rock right underneath the organic layer of the soils. In this particular case, given our history of this particular area, the soils here are actually quite good. Coming down from the orchard, what was the orchard, and then down this area, and then across Blanchard Road, and eventually all the way down to the river. The soils that you're probably aware that are in Stonewall and West Branch, and now this particular area, are very good as far as the organic level of that soil, being able to establish, first of all, houses for the construction there, and then also for test pits. It works out very nicely. And one of the ways to be able to take a look at that is to look at the length of the septic plumes. If the plumes are very long, what that means is that when the effluent from the septic goes into the actual fields and then it leaches out of those fields, if the soils are particularly poor, you can end up having plumes that are extremely long, wide, and what have you. In these particular cases, you can take a look at the plan sets you have, and they are abnormally short, which means that the soil's leaching capacity, to the point where the nitrates, I'm getting a little technical, but they dissipate in their parts per billion requirement very quickly, which means that the soils are actually quite good. Toward that end, a high-intensity soils map is very expensive to do, as you can imagine. And if it's necessary, so be it. We'd be the first ones to say, let's take a look at this, because we don't want to design a house that's going to go in a poor area. In this particular section of town, really, the soils here are quite good. So we would just ask for that waiver of the high-intensity soils, because we do have a medium intensity that shows what's already there.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I'm sensitive to the idea of skipping steps or overlooking steps because of the burden that's put on the planning process, which then could potentially be passed down to the homeowner or someone trying to resell, finding issues later down the road. But it sounds like there's still a mechanism in place to do soils testing that's more appropriate for that area, the high intensity not necessarily being the appropriate type of testing for the area.
Yes,
that
and
correct?
that testing has already been done.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Anything from this side? Ann?
Yeah, I want to compliment you on your application and the information. I have two main concerns about this project, one being the traffic, but the traffic report has come back and it seems to be satisfactory. I'm always a little skeptical about the number of trips they show in the morning and the evening, which seems a little low. But the report is there, and those are experts. I do like the suggestion, though, from Ashton Palmer, I think it is.
Alton.
Pardon me?
Alton.
Alton Palmer, that the accident that occurred, the crash, that maybe that could be looked into a little more closely to see if there's something about that intersection or if it impacts whatever. I like that suggestion. Also, I was.
Excuse me, yeah, could you pull your mic down?
Oh, I'm
Maybe
sorry.
for home. I
I'm
presume.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So as I was saying, I liked Alton Palmer's suggestion about reviewing that one crash for safety purposes. Also, I'm concerned about the water and the addition of the wells and the septic systems. But again, the reports come back and I think they look good. And so I hope the neighbors, we did have some neighbors who commented, and including one who I think was a hydrogeologic engineer. If they have disputes with that, then they should come forward now, I think. But it looks good. So I think that's, like I say, I think the project looks very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any others? Yeah,
Did we get an answer on the street light? Is there going to be a street light at the end of the road?
There almost is one, or there is one that's almost at the end of the road right now. It's an overhead Cobra light that is immediate. It's just kitty corner across from this, where this road, it's actually right there. This is the West Branch Road, or excuse me, the Stonewall Road right here, and the light is right here. So the Cobra light is already in existence right there.
Typically,
you.
there is a street light at the intersection of a new subdivision road and the major road, just so people are aware at night they're coming up on the road. But you're saying, like, how far away, how many feet is that existing light from the intersection?
About 50 to 60 feet.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Josh?
Carla, one other thing in the coming, between now and when they come back for final. 250-37B4. In the case of a dead-end street, we can require up to a 30-foot utility easement and up to a 20-foot right-of-way for pedestrians, bikes. Some of that's going to get addressed with the whole byway issue. But does the town want an easement? It's right, not a question that
Look
needs to
into
get answered here, but
Okay.
is that something that we're gonna want of the applicant? And in that case, I mean, does the town want it? And
Okay. So before I open the public hearing, there was a great deal, as in, great deal of concern regarding water. And I noticed the hydrogeologic study historically looked at, I think, 10 wells maybe. I think the range was about 2.5 to 60 gallons per minute, which I'd never heard of. Must have been, and I think the well was 700 feet deep. But in general, obviously it would, every lot has to drill a well,
Yes.
right? And fortunately, we have an aquifer that is supposed to be one of the best in the state. But have you ever run into in Maryland where I lived, you hardly ever hit water. Here, have you, in a subdivision such as this, have you ever had a lot that couldn't get water? And if so, what was the remedy?
The only time that's ever occurred with us was down in Kennebunk on a virtual island. It wasn't quite an island, it was a coastal barrier area where there are few summer homes, and the water was brackish. So what they did was they actually had a communal well that was at the end of the causeway, as it were, that leads out to that. So the half a dozen homes that are out there actually have, from the communal well that's about almost a quarter mile away, to be able to go down and get the fresh water. But otherwise, this is basically a welcome to Maine scenario. Fortunately, as you mentioned, we have some of the best water in the world, arguably so. But, and we have quite a number of aquifers here, and in actually bringing it home to this particular project, when CV and Mahar did the work with us, they also found a recharge rate that was anywhere from 2 to 4 times the amount that would actually be normal for wells in this particular area.
Yeah.
So it works out pretty well.
Yeah.
Welcome to Cumberland. Water's pretty good here.
And I hope everybody at home has, that all of this is online at least, you know, in terms of the traffic study and the hydro study. And one other question, what percent of wells these days are have to be fractured to get the required water, do you know?
I'm not really aware of that many that have to be hydrofractured toward that end. It's usually just case drilling.
Yeah, okay. Again, I'm asking for the benefit of, because there was great interest and concern about this many homes and the possibility of drying up the aquifer or, you know, having well issues. So, yeah, thank you. Other,
I had one quick
okay,
question.
yeah, go ahead. Lorraine.
It's about byways, so if I'm not mistaken, and this would be tapping into the history in the room, and I don't know where north, south, east, west is on the diagram up there, but so the backside of the development, so as you come around the curve towards the cul-de-sac, the property above that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's Orchard Cove, which is a 10-lot subdivision. Do they have sidewalks? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Public hearing is still open for in the room as well as at home. And Whitney, do we have, nobody is logged in? Okay, yeah, let's start with John with the commission, and I believe you had some thoughts too about the waiver request, as I recall in your letter.
John Jensenyas, Vice Chair of the Lands and Conservation Commission. Overall, the Lands and Conservation Commission thinks that the developer is proposing a reasonable development plan for the subdivision. And we would support the waiver to not have to depict all the trees that are 10 inches or greater in diameter. And we also would support the waiver request allowing the 2,200-foot linear foot road in order to limit the impact to the streams and wetlands. We do have concerns about the open space. In the most recent letter from the developer, they said that they were planning to have the HOA own the open space, and also the possibility that the HOA would hold the easement, the conservation easement on the open space. In general, we prefer conservation easements be held by an entity other than the property owner. In terms of the trails, like Ross Estates, the open space in 5 subdivisions in that area could provide a nice trail system and for the residents and of all the homes in that area. However, open space can create challenges when it's owned privately. In establishing a trail system, therefore, like Ross Estates, we like the developers to consider offering the town either the open space or a public easement to the open space. And also going forward, the commission is interested in ensuring that the open space has an acceptable forest management plan.
John, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
That regarding your opinion and other members of the commission that you know regarding the effect of the impervious, additional impervious surface created by a walkway. Have you ever discussed that among commission members, the balance between safety and environment?
We have not discussed it on this particular
Okay.
project. I know we've discussed it on other projects and have opted for to have the sidewalk, but we have not on this particular project.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank to all members of the commission. Yeah, appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Denny Gallaudet of 67
Denny.
Range Road. I'm a colleague of John's on the commission, and I'm also chair of the Forestry Subcommittee. And I want to talk a little bit about the forestry side of this. I'm a landowner myself, have my own woodland, 35-acre woodland on Range Road, and just had the pleasure of going up to the sawmill and bringing back 150 board feet of black cherry. The sawyer kidded me on the way, said, "Are you going to need a police escort for this, for this load of wood?" I want to give you a little bit of background about the forest that we look over in our subcommittee. We have in Cumberland 1,200 acres of forest land that we own outright, 13 properties, one of which is the West Branch Pond, which the West Branch Road development, which is right down the road here. When that was developed, that came into the ownership of the town, so we actually own it. I would say that's the most beautiful woodland, in my opinion, that we have in town. I had the forester in there last week. We were looking for what we call legacy trees. This is close to an old-growth forest as we have, and there's a legacy pine there that's 4 feet in diameter. It's a beautiful forest. The soils are excellent, as we've heard, and I have great hopes for this open space from a forestry perspective as it grows older. What I want to say about how this is going to be managed going forward, and this is why we're taking a keen interest, our subcommittee, because this is really the pilot for the conservation subdivision plan. We're going to get a lot more, I think, woodlands coming under conservation in the town. And we, at the moment, we have 260 acres that's open space that is the result of past developments, and 20 of them are 10 acres or more. So that's a significant amount of forest land that we don't directly engage ourselves with, except to educate and work with the landowners. So we've investigated the forestry management plans for these 260 acres, and I have to say to you that they're very poor and weak. Poor. That's too pejorative. I would say that they could be more complete. Let's put it that way. The town's forests are managed pursuant to guiding principles that the council has approved, and they deal with issues of diversity of species, the age of species, and linked to a set of standards called the Forestry Stewardship Council, which is a global standard granting agency. About 40% of Maine's wood are under this standard, as are the towns. So what we hope moving forward is that as we develop these projects, that the homeowners associations will seek to have more granularity and specificity in the way they manage the projects and the kind of standards to which they're holding their own land. What we would hope as a model, and there is one, which is Idlewood, which has a conservation easement on the 45 acres of HOA land there that runs, in this case, to the town. And so there's a separation of duties, if you will, between the owner and the person that owns the easement. So it's that separation of duties that we'd be looking for, and we hope that as we move forward, that homeowner associations will take a look at our guiding principles, and in particular, the Forestry Stewardship Council standards, and see if they can't build those into their own management of their own properties. I think, just speaking for myself and looking at the Idlewood as a good example, it's a little hard to take the silvicultural standards and put them into an HOA. There's so much baggage going on in the HOA, stormwater buffers and so on and so forth, that it would really be better for there to be a separate conservation easement running to the town perhaps, or to a land trust or whoever, but that there just be a more complete understanding of the wonderful resource that we have in the forests here in town. We're about 21% of our forest lands are under conservation now, one form or another, and we may get to 30% before we know it as a result of this this conservation ordinance. So it's going to be a beautiful forest. It is now. I'm sure. I've looked at the soils, from the maps and also from an area perspective. So it's really a jewel and it'll, I'm sure, rise to the standard of West Branch Woods, which is right down the street.
Thank you, Denny. Other comments? Nobody is queued in. Yes, sir.
Jeff Kalnich, 371 Blanchard Road. Can I approach this just to point out?
They won't be able to hear you. Is there a microphone?
Is there a way to point?
You see how it's picking it up?
Okay. All right, this is, just to go back, this is what we talk about, Section A. Then up here, this is where they're talking about the open space. And this right here, this section of road is privately held. It's actually owned by the Blanchard Road Association. It's Blanchard Road Maintenance Association. One thing that concerns me about making this public is that the easiest way to get to this is over the private road. You just keep going and you could park here, and that's really not allowed legally. You can't use a private road to access town-owned land. So I want to point out that problem. It is a nice piece of woods. The former owner let us walk it. It's been heavily forested, but that's not to say someday it wouldn't have, legacy trees. But I really want you to think about that piece of it and what it would mean. And it's also important to me as an abutter that there be some way to control what's happening there. I know people who live next to common land, open space, not in Cumberland, but people start camping and things like that. And it's like, who do you call to get the campers out of there? That's an issue to me, but also the access I wanted to point out as well. And I think there's plenty of water out there, but anecdotally, there's a pond right here next to Carrie's driveway that I think Pompiano dug quite a number of years ago. And basically that shows the groundwater level. And right now it's about 3 or 4 feet below the road. You can see it go down and come up every year. So for folks that are worried about the groundwater, you can go monitor it visually at the pond. It's groundwater level. And the only other thing is kind of more of a big picture thing. I think it's the last time this subdivision came up. There was a proposal a few years ago. And I mentioned Skillen Road and Route 100 and the traffic and, the problems there of the development in West Cumberland. And we got to a point just before the pandemic when we had a DOT person here and there was talk about having another meeting over at the West Branch. You'd have like a workshop over there, over at the public by the fire department. And I'd just like to raise your awareness. I think there was a lot of different board members back then, but raise your awareness to that. There's a lot going on in this part of Cumberland, and that intersection isn't getting any easier to navigate. So I'll just throw that out there. Which, again,
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any others that would like to speak? Still nobody, okay. Then I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for questions or comments. No, okay. So I think we need to discuss the waivers. And who has the, well, now my iPad's off, but there were how many now?
There's 6.
5 or 6? Six.
Six.
Could we discuss those? And is, the first is the 10-inch diameter. Does anyone object to waiving that? None? Okay, what's the next? Do you have the list there,
Definition
Sean?
of high-intensity soil
High-intensity
surveys.
soil survey.
Okay. And,
My expectation is I'm fine with waiving that. I'd like to hear Al's just kind of blessing, since he probably knows
could we-
more. And Al, you don't have to do it.
It would
it
be
can
good to do
now,
it
or
now, I
could
think,
be
for the
just
board.
between now and final.
And-
We don't have to do all the waivers now.
But if
We
you
can
could
do it
introduce yourself and,
Hi, good evening, Al Palmer from Goral Palmer. Based on the intensity of development and the size of the lots, we would not object to the granting of the waiver.
Okay, while you're up there, what about, if you can't do this without looking at the stormwater numbers or something, what about the curbing? Do you have any issues with that?
The curbing, as long as they provide an intersection grading plan as part of the final approval, we wouldn't have an objection to the elimination of the curbing.
Thank you.
okay, let's do the the byway. Comments, you're gonna have to vote, so.
Well, I mean,
What-
again,
what are
we
your-
don't have
what's
to
your
do all the
thought?
waivers tonight. I mean, we can, the ones that,
Well, I think it would help.
oh, I'm
We
fine
don't,
with
we don't
doing the
have to
ones
do them
that-
all, but I would
but
think for the
like if-
next step, where we.
I don't disagree, and we can vote on the ones that but
Okay.
for me, the byway is gonna, I wanna hear them come back and maybe give us some options. Not entirely opposed to it. I could see myself waiving it, but I'd like to,
But I appreciated your comment, Josh, about when looking at all of the various illustrations we have of the curves. I think Jason might have mentioned this too, but to have just the road with no other mechanism for biking or walking, I'm sort of borderline on it now. Anyone else want to comment?
I don't think that it's necessary for that type of development in a rural setting, that, it's not like people are driving through. The only people coming in and out are the people that live there, and with the proper, speed limit sign, children at play, I think, that, at this point, for us to say, okay, put sidewalks in, so now you have to have an HOA that's gonna maintain those sidewalks, who's gonna clear the snow off of them, in the middle of the winter, and so, I don't know, I live in a community that we don't have sidewalks, and it works fine.
Okay.
Works fine.
Bill?
I have a little bit of a varying view. I live on Friar Lane, which goes between Tuttle and Middle Road, and it looks almost like that. It loops around like that. Now, there is traffic going through, but it's also very dangerous for the kids out there in the streets and on the bicycles. It's really, a couple of times I've almost hit a child going down there, so I would opt for the sidewalks just for that, but it's just a different
Ann,
perspective.
you wanna wait, or do you have an
Well,
opinion?
At this point, I would say, I think we need to be consistent. I mean, if we're going to require sidewalks, then we should require sidewalks everywhere in subdivisions. If we're not, I just think we need to be a little more consistent. I feel like we're being a little wishy-washy here. And I'm not.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, exactly. And I would be fine with no sidewalks. I mean, I live
Okay.
in a subdivision without sidewalks,
Bill?
but.
I think there is room for discussion, because if it's a straight road going in with a cul-de-sac, you can see the whole length of the road. When you have sharp curves like that, and you're coming around the corner, you just can't see what's going on, and they play on the road, so it's just a different perspective. But I don't think we need to have a standard. I think it would depend on how the road goes. I'm
Amanda?
supposed to disagree with you every month.
Amanda?
Are there other safety mechanisms that are under your purview at this time, or are speed bumps, speed tables, all of that stuff, that would be beyond what your planning entails, is that right?
We weren't planning on at the moment, as far as speed bumps are, well, you don't want speed bumps, speed
Right, no, you
tables
don't.
are maybe something different, but typically what happens with regarding the curves, when you have curved roads, notwithstanding very sharp, like U-turn roads, then you tend to have some issues. But if you have a straight road, in other words, then people tend to build up speed on those roads. It just naturally happens, which doesn't mean people are racing down the roads, but the accelerator tends to go a little bit faster. When you've got a road that, where you typically end up slowing down because of the curve, and this is not really a sharp curve, it's actually, keep in mind the overall acreage that we're looking at here is well over 20 acres. As far as the location of the road is concerned, the traffic is generally moving fairly slowly anyway. And as I believe somebody pointed out, this is, and as we designed it, we wanted to make sure that because it's a dead-end road and there are only people who are going to be living there, notwithstanding friends and guests upon rare occasion, there's only 13 house lots here. And most people, not to say that the world is not full of colorful characters and you never know who your neighbors are going to be, but generally speaking, 13 people are going to know who their neighbors are. And they're going to know if there are children that are in the area, whether it's riding bikes or just walking or playing ball in the street or what have you. And most people are going to get that idea, unlike a through street, which often can have people just cutting, making a cut through to be able to get from one place to the other. They don't live there, they don't necessarily care that much. In this particular area, coupled with the environmental impacts of this, we just opted, it would be, we could have put the sidewalk in there, but we just opted not to because of the fairly negative impacts and the fact that it is pretty safe with the curve that we have there, where people are going to be traveling much more slowly anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Josh?
Do you have road detail? in
I'm
the
sorry?
plan? Is there a road detail in the plan?
Oh, yeah, in the plan set, yes.
You know off the top of your head where it is? How, do you know what the width of the road is? Do you have shoulders?
Yes, it's, I believe it's 20 feet with 2-foot shoulders.
On both sides or one?
I thought it was 22.
20,
I mean-
I thought it was 22 feet
22.
of a paved road with 2 foot of a gravel shoulder on both sides, so
Yes.
2 feet
Okay.
on both,
Thank you.
so
And
a
it
total
is-
of 4
that
feet
helps.
of gravel.
It is actually in here.
Okay.
Which is, yeah.
All right, so it sounds to me, this is not just for planning purposes, that we're pretty evenly divided. I certainly could go either way, and especially now hearing that helps to hear the width and the shoulders. And I know a number of subdivisions. I have a daughter who lives in a subdivision on Autumn Ridge that they have sidewalks, they're not plowed in the winter. There is a lot of work because of the gully next to them. West Branch, I think you said partway maybe, and so it's pretty heterogeneous, it seems like. So I guess well, from your perspective, would you want to see a vote tonight on that for design purposes, or would you just as soon go to the final?
That's a loaded question.
I know it is, it is. Because we certainly, and that's kind of why I brought it up in the first place, to see where we are as a board. Again, it sounds to me like it would be 4-3 not needing it, but I'm not sure of that.
It might even be 5-2. When they mentioned they had the 2 feet on either side.
Yeah.
And it's not a through street. My street's a through street,
Yeah.
and
Plus
there's
it's a dead
nothing
end.
on either side.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's room for people to walk their dogs and
1,
so
2,
forth. So
3,
I will
yeah, so,
go along with Ann tonight.
It
so.
would be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we could, notwithstanding the
I
latest
thought-
conversation.
So any other comments on this
all of
before
these
we
waivers.
consider this waiver?
I will add that beyond interpreting the ordinance, I think one of the most important things that we have to do up here is to try to apply things that will help with safety for not only the residents there, but other people that might be there at any time on the road. So, and to Ann's point, I do believe we sort of need to try to standardize things and be consistent. I do feel that we waive things a little bit too easy sometimes. If I were the developer, I completely understand your request for this waiver. I'm sure there are various reasons not to do it, one being cost. To me, there's just nothing more important than safety. This 13 houses, I don't like using the word only 13 houses. That's a lot of houses. At any given moment, there could be 10, 15, potentially 20 kids out there in the summer playing, or worse in the winter. I just think the top of the list is safety, and this is our ability to, right now, to try to start to standardize and enforce our own ordinance, and potentially, keep kids safer. So, that's it on that one.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Amanda?
My only just response to that, and it's not necessarily my own opinion, but just playing devil's advocate, is whether or not a sidewalk actually does provide a higher level of safety in this particular setting than a speed table or a sign, kids at play, or something like that. So I think we're making the assumption that the sidewalks would provide for a safer environment for children at play or people walking dogs and so on and so forth, perhaps without evidence, as opposed to the other options that you are choosing to exercise. So I also live in a community where we don't have, or a subdivision, it's Turnberry Drive, we don't have actual sidewalks. I can almost guarantee you none of those children are staying on those sidewalks anyway. They're going into the street. That's what kids do. So, and again, once you put that sidewalk in, who's maintaining it? Are they going to maintain it properly? Does it become more dangerous because it is covered in ice and snow? I don't know. So, sounds like the safety mechanisms you've chose to exercise may be sufficient, but I'm not an expert either way, so.
Okay, thank you. So, let me suggest, what was there were two others?
I don't know, I don't
Yeah,
remember.
the,
So there's a
location
depiction of building
of
locations.
buildings, right? And then the dead end, right, the road, that we're waiting for the fire chief to let us.
Right.
Fine with that.
Which
if
it
the
could
fire
be a
chief
condition.
Writes something to that
Could I suggest that we vote on these one at a time, Josh, and just, or do you have another
Sure,
item?
let me just, yeah, yep.
Because if we put them all together, I think it was complicated.
Have we gotten through the list?
I will make a motion that due to the unique character of the property and the project, that we waive the requirement for depiction of trees 10 inches or greater on the plans.
Second.
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor of that motion? Okay, that's unanimous, Christina.
I make a motion that due to the unique character of the project and the property, that we waive the requirement for a submission of a high-intensity soil survey.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of that motion? 4, 2, all those opposed? Wait a minute, I'm sorry. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? So it passes 5 to 2.
I will make a motion that due to the unique character of the project and the property, that we waive the requirement for depiction of building locations on the plans.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? That is unanimous.
I make a motion that.
Should we table this one?
We'll make we can make a motion if we don't agree to it, we can still waive it. I mean, it isn't dead. We can waive it at the next meeting. So I'll make a motion, then we can, I will make a motion that due to the unique character of the project and the property, that we waive the 2,000 linear foot limit of the dead end road length and allow up to 2,400 feet.
Could we say pending the fire chief's approval, or no? Okay, all right.
I don't think you can, I don't
Okay.
think you can make a conditional waiver.
I don't know that you can or you can't, but I can just about 100% assure you he's
Okay,
going to
all
be
right.
fine with it. We're talking about 200 feet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Oh, wait,
of what-
vote,
Go ahead.
discussion. I'm gonna vote no right now. If the fire chief says it's fine, I'm fine with the waiver.
Ditto.
Ditto.
Just
Okay.
saying,
All right, good point. All those in favor? 2, all those opposed?
there were actually,
So 5 to 2 against,
It was-
but,
4 to 3, I think.
it was.
oh, is it 4 to
4 to
3?
3.
I'm sorry. Complicated counting.
I will make a motion that, due to the unique character of the property and the project, that we waive the requirement for a sidewalk.
Sidewalk or byway?
Along the subdivision road.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Yes, second. All right, discussion on that motion?
Is it appropriate to say sidewalk or byway in
The sidewalk is
general?
what's in the ordinance.
It is?
It,
Okay.
it used to be byway, and I've seen it
Side-
both ways. So you're saying, what was it, 250?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the table, 250, attachment 1, table 2, sidewalk width, residential accidents greater than 50 vehicles per day, TBD by project. So in the
Yeah, in the table.
sidewalk.
Could I
Go ahead,
Well,
Carla.
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Go-
comment?
Here's my one day. I would feel better if there was a 4-foot shoulder on one side, which would allow if.
Which is a
kid-
byway.
Yes.
It's really, but it's not. It's not, I mean, it's not a byway. To me, it serves the functional purpose of a byway or a sidewalk, but it is not. It's a 4-foot shoulder.
Well, that's what Blanchard has the whole way down, which they
I'm
call a
simply saying,
byway.
If that was what the road geometry looked like, I would not have any problem waiving this requirement.
Is it possible?
But you're talking about an asphalt,
No.
4-foot?
No,
No,
gravel.
gravel.
Gravel shoulder.
It's-
Right now, they got a 22-foot road width, paved road width, 2-foot gravel shoulders on each side.
Right.
To me, 2 feet isn't really enough for people to be walking on it. Kids are gonna do whatever kids do. I mean, but we can at least provide something for them to do it out of the road. And I think it gives a little bit more visibility. I don't disagree with the sidewalk issue, and I'm less concerned about there being a sidewalk in the middle of winter, so I don't really care if it isn't maintained. I don't think kids are gonna be riding their bike. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of people walking down the road in the middle of winter.
You talking about putting all 4 feet on one side or having 4 feet on both sides?
4 foot on one, 2 foot one side, 4 foot one side.
2 foot one side, 4 foot one side, okay.
Isn't that worse in the
So the
winter?
motion was seconded, discussion on the motion, but can I ask, Jim, does that sound, if we made that a condition, that's certainly, I think, more flexible than requiring a sidewalk.
It is more flexible than a sidewalk, to be sure. One of the things that we looked at, and believe me, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from a safety issue, but given the criteria that we already spoke about, I just don't think it's necessary. And one of the things that we're looking at by adding an extra 2 feet of gravelled shoulder is that the drainage swales that are on both sides of this road are meant to try to actually minimize the siltation that's actually going into the water that's going to end up going down underneath the road and then eventually down to the river. Now, is that a huge consideration? Let's call it what it is. No, it's not that big. However, from an environmental impact standpoint, we have to adhere to the 2-foot shoulders. We're not asking for any waiver from that, obviously. By adding an extra 2 feet, that's a lot of extra gravel. And from a siltation standpoint, that tends to put a lot of that extra erosion and siltation into the drainage swales, and then the homeowners association is going to be responsible for maintaining that, and that's just going to be even more siltation in there that's going to end up down into the river. Now, that's not hugely dramatic, but it is a step that's kind of not in the direction that we were intending to go from an environmental standpoint.
Well, let me ask then, from the water point of view, compare the 4-foot gravel with a sidewalk that's 4 feet, which
Then-
is worse.
Well, now you've got greater impervious surface area as far as the sidewalk is concerned. So if I had to go on record and say what's worse, I would say a sidewalk because of the impervious surface area. This just comes back to why we designed it the way we did, and thinking that, safety is obviously a consideration, siltation is a consideration. It works the way we've got it here. That's not to say that it wouldn't work with an extra 2 feet, and if that's the penchant of the board, we will certainly do that. I just don't think that it's necessary, and I think that the negatives would typically outweigh the positives in that regard.
All right, further discussion on the
I
motion
forgot what
to
the motion
waive
is
the.
now.
I'm sorry, Bill?
I forgot what the motion is now.
Motion
Can I-
was to
Motion
waive,
was to waive it.
to waive the requirement for a sidewalk.
Okay,
And we know there'll be 2 feet on each side with,
Okay.
with no further stipulation.
thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? So Ann is up, so 5. All those opposed? Okay, 5 to 2, the waiver passes. And what's the other?
What exactly is the requirement for curbing? Is it just along the whole road?
No.
It's an open drainage. The point I was gonna make is often you get sidewalks when you have an urban drainage system. So you have curbing, catch basins. It makes sense to have a raised sidewalk, separated sidewalk. That's not what you're getting here. You're getting a rural style subdivision with
Right.
ditches.
It would be a granite arc, basically, at the curve on both sides of the road.
Okay, just at the curve.
Yes.
Okay. I will make a motion that due to the unique characteristics of the property and the project, that we waive the requirement for curbing along the curve of the road.
I second it.
Okay, discussion on this motion? Jason?
Could we amend the motion based on what Alton said? Which was pursuant to their gradient or appropriate gradients or,
Just providing an intersection grading plan.
Easy.
make a motion to amend?
I don't think we can do a conditional waiver. If you, here's what my suggestion, we don't grant it at this meeting. If you provide that to the town's engineer and he blesses off on it, I think everybody here, would anybody be opposed to it if the applicant brought forth the information Al says would make him feel comfortable? So I think you would have your waiver if you provide that.
So we're gonna vote.
So we withdraw the waiver? I mean, the
No,
the motion?
on the table.
We're gonna vote
My
it down.
suggestion is we don't allow it. That doesn't prevent us from we can grant the
Do it.
waiver at the final hearing, correct?
Jim,
This
you're,
is-
you're clear with, okay?
Yes.
Correct, Carla? There's no reason we can't not grant it at this meeting and then grant it at the next meeting.
No, it's just cleaner to get them done at preliminary because the final design is gonna be based on what you tell them now.
Well, okay, we could just make it a condition of we can't make it I don't think we can make it a condition of a conditional waiver, but we can make it a condition of approval.
Preliminary plan approval, that the applicant provide the whatever.
Yeah, we'll get the language when we do.
Intersection grade.
That's fine.
So we'll just add it as a condition of approval to the whole project.
Good. Good. So we don't need the motion.
No, we still have the motion. And I would say that we take, I am willing to vote for the waiver, and then when we get to
Okay, all right,
conditions of
got it.
approval, we will add a condition of
Understood.
approval that
Got it.
asks for this piece of information.
Everybody good with that? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, unanimous. Was that the last?
I believe that,
Yes,
is
that's it.
that it for waivers?
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you.
So findings of fact. The first, pollution. The 13-lot residential subdivision is not located in a mapped floodplain. Each lot will have a private septic system and passing trail soil tests for each of the proposed lots have been provided. The residential development will not result in undue air pollution. Streams will not be used for the disposal of effluents. A nitrate plume analysis has been completed and shows no off-site impacts to groundwater. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Sufficient water. The lots will be served by private wells. A hydrogeologic evaluation report outlines the water usage on the property and calculates the amount of recharge the property will contribute to the underlying aquifer. The report concludes that there will be little, if any, drawdown to the aquifer due to the 13 new wells, one for each lot. The town engineer has reviewed and approved the findings of the hydrogeologic report. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Municipal water supply, the subdivision will not utilize public water. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. erosion. The applicant has submitted an erosion and sedimentation control plan that has been reviewed and approved by the town engineer. The Maine Department of Environmental Protection stormwater permit is required, which will include details on erosion and sedimentation control. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Traffic assessment dated April 26, 2021 was prepared by Traffic Solutions. The assessment shows that the proposed 13 single-family homes can be expected to generate a total of 123 trips during a typical weekday. The Maine DOT Accident Records Section crash data for the period 2018 to 2020 shows that the defined study area is not a high crash location. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Sewage disposal. Each home will have a private septic system. A preliminary soil test report was conducted on April 22, 2021. The report dated March 26, 2021 shows that the soil is suitable for subsurface wastewater disposal. Soil test locations are shown on the plan. A complete wastewater disposal system design, HHE-200, is needed for a permit to install the system once building locations, building sizes, and site development are conceptualized. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Municipal solid waste disposal. Cumberland provides curbside trash collection and recycling through a contracted waste hauler. The addition of 13 new homes will not cause a burden on the municipality, their ability to dispose of solid waste. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Aesthetic, cultural, and natural values. The area of proposed developments have been designed to impact as little of the protected natural resources as possible, and over 20 acres of the property will be preserved as part of the approval. Letters from state agencies stating that no areas of the site contain significant wildlife or habitat areas, or that significant impacts to historic or protected natural resources will occur. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Conformity with local ordinances and plans. The plans have been reviewed by the town planner, the town engineer, and town department heads. Review comments are being addressed by the applicant's engineer. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Financial and technical capacity. No change here, right? Based on what Josh was addressing. Technical capacity is evidenced by the use of the following experts: a professional engineer, a licensed land surveyor, a traffic engineer, land use attorneys, and a wetlands scientist. Financial capacity, there is a letter dated April 21, 2001 from Ballantine Partners stating that Chris Bowden holds an excess of $800,000 in liquid securities that will fund the completion of the project. Additional evidence is required for final submission. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Surface waters.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
I don't believe that letter was dated April 21st, 2001. It was probably 2021.
Good.
Typo.
Yeah, it's hard to read and think at the same
No, it
time.
says 2001 in there. It just,
I know.
yes, it is it is dated April 21st,
I read it
2021,
just as it
correct?
was written. Next, surface waters, outstanding river segments. The project will involve the filling of a small portion of the overall wetlands on site, and there will be a stream crossing. All work within these areas need to be permitted by the Maine DEP. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Groundwater. A hydrogeologic evaluation was conducted that concludes there will be little, if any, drawdown to the aquifer due to the 13 new wells. The report concludes there will be little effect on the groundwater quality due to the private septic systems that will be used within the development. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Flood areas, the development is not located within a 100-year floodplain. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Stormwater, a stormwater permit application has been submitted to the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. A copy of the stormwater management reports supporting the application was provided in a packet. Receipt of the DEP stormwater permit will be required for final approval. The town engineer has reviewed the stormwater management plan and has made several comments which will need to be addressed for final submission. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. Freshwater wetlands. The wetlands have been mapped and shown on the plan. Impact to the wetlands has been minimized to the greatest extent possible. A wetlands permit is required from the Maine DEP. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. River, stream, or brook. There are 2 streams on the parcel. A Maine DEP permit by rule has been applied for. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met for preliminary approval. So the conditions of approval, I see 5, are there,
Yeah, we're gonna
gonna add the one?
we're gonna have at least one more, but Carla, are we missing a limitation of approval?
No, the limitation of approval is for site plan application.
Oh, it's only for site plan. Okay, thank you.
So do you have the 6th, or at least the 6th condition of approval regarding the,
What do we need?
Of an intersection grading plan?
So that would be
regarding the
number
curbs?
6. Receipt of an intersection grading plan. Carla, I'm fine with the language that's in there for number 5 in regards to an updated letter for commitment for financing. But we've already had that discussion that really, so as long as the applicant is clear as to what we're looking for, and if he's not, can you have that discussion with them between now and then to make sure we get what we need?
So Josh, just so that I'm clear, what exactly do we need?
Well, I think what we're talking about is, in a
I realize
normally,
it's
we get a bank
private.
commitment
Yeah,
letter.
right.
But this is being funded through
Yes.
a more private means,
Yeah.
through an individual who's set aside money, and I'm okay, so it's not a bank commitment letter, it doesn't say exactly what a bank commitment letter was, and that, when in the findings of fact and in, this condition of approval, I thought that's what Carla was driving at, is that we wanted something that more closely replicated a bank commitment letter. But I think what she's really wants to make sure, and I think what is more important, is that we make sure there's a mechanism by which there's money set aside, such that if the project gets started, the infrastructure can get completed.
So we're asking
If
for
the
another
developer-
letter,
Or
or,
surety bond?
No, you don't want to go.
I mean, what do we
Wanna
need,
do
just
that?
so that Jim knows?
I think the way it's written is appropriate, because what you're saying is, we want to know how much the subdivision's going to cost. That's your estimate of values, how much of the roads, all those things. And then I need to know with the applicant's ability to finance that cost of construction, that's what they need to provide. Now, it might be that I just simply ask them to provide me with a statement from their account
he said they were
showing this
liquid.
money's there, because it's not going to be a commitment letter. It's going to be
Well, but
something.
a commitment letter doesn't actually usually say that anyway.
It doesn't.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so you're clear with,
Yes, we
Okay,
can work with Carla
good.
on that.
okay?
Do we need anything still from, I know we got things recently, Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, And I don't think these necessarily have to be in as conditions.
No.
It just has to be clear to the applicant that they know what they need.
Right.
And historical, archaeological, historical, are we waiting on?
I don't know if the letter's been submitted, but it will be absolutely there for final submission.
Right.
It's required, we're required to have it before it comes back to you for final. Have that, or sometimes, actually, that's not true. Sometimes you can do a
Right, we'll do a
approval with
condition of
condition.
approval at that point. Anyway, I make a motion that we adopt the findings of fact as written. We didn't make any amendments, did we? As written.
And, well, only the 2001, that was changed.
Oh, yeah, so
Yeah.
I amend my motion, my motion to be, I make a motion that we adopt the findings of fact as amended.
Second?
Seconded, all those in favor?
And we've already considered the proposed conditions of approval. Anyway, real good?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we approve preliminary major subdivision review for 14 lot, 13 home site subdivision, Blanchard Oaks, on a 51.78 acre parcel located at 365 Blanchard Road Extension, Tax Assessor Map R08, Lot 68 Alpha, subject to the standard conditions of approval and the 6 recommended conditions of preliminary plan approval.
Do I hear a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to make just one final comment, and that is regarding the DEP permit. We anticipate having it before we come back for the final approval. If we do not, and we've run up against this a couple of times because there's a lot of subdivisions going on right now, if we make the final approval contingent upon receipt of that permit and we don't have it on the day of the meeting, but it comes in, for instance, the following day, we'd end up having to wait a month before we can actually get going with anything. So I'm not asking for anything specific this evening, just kind of putting us on, just putting it out to the board. If we don't have it by the date of the meeting, could we get, or would you consider a conditional approval? We would not be able to get the Mylar from the town, or excuse me, the Mylar. We would not be able to get the signed plans from the town, but if that letter comes in 2 or 3 days after that vote, then we could certainly give that to the town, and then we could ostensibly have that signed document after that part.
Well, I know we've done that before, and Carl is comfortable. Is anybody not comfortable with that on the board? So
And we can discuss that further hopefully it's a moot point.
Yeah,
but,
right, hopefully.
great. Thank you all for your
Right,
time.
Thank you very much. Right, so before we start the next item, do we want a break?
I would take 2 minutes.
Yes.
2 minutes, all right. Let's say 5 minutes at the max. Because I know it's not going to be 2 minutes.
Amend the motion?
is, there we go. I can 0.1 acre site is located on a tax assessor map, U21 Lot 1 in the Village Office Commercial 1, VOC 1 zoning district. The applicant owner is Andrew Haggerty, represented by Alton Palmer, PE of Goral Palmer Engineers. Before we start, Carla, do you have any comments to make to introduce? No, okay. Mr. Palmer, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen. Al Palmer from Goral Palmer on behalf of Mr. Haggerty. Along with me is Brad Pinot from our office. This property has been in front of the board previously, including earlier this year for the zone change. The site was previously developed as a 6-unit, 1-lot subdivision. Currently, the plans in front of you would add 3 additional units, so it would be a 1-lot, 9-unit subdivision. That technically requires both an amended subdivision plan and site plan approval under the ordinance. As you are aware from the rezoning discussion, Mr. Haggerty would be purchasing approximately 70,000 square feet of land from the adjacent property, formerly the board barn, to allow the construction of this 3-unit building. When Mr. Haggerty was in front of the board for the rezoning recommendation to the council, at that point he was thinking it was going to be a 4-unit building. With this being 1-story units, the existing units are 2 stories. So you've got most of the living space up on the 2nd floor. These units are 1-level living, so that makes the building a little bigger. And when we actually did the final site plan, Mr. Haggerty elected to drop 1 unit, have one of the units be a 2-bedroom, so that it fit better onto the site. So the density is a little bit less than it was anticipated when he was in front of the board for the rezoning. And as you enter the site, as you come into the development, there'd be 2 1-bedroom units and then a 2-bedroom unit. So for the sake of the subdivision, it's a 3-unit addition with 4 bedrooms under the zoning. Given the hour and the fact that you have additional items on the agenda, I'm just going to quickly hit a few things. As part of the submission, we received comments from CV and Mahar. We have responded to those. We believe we comply with all of the questions and comments that they had, but given the timing of all the submissions, they haven't had the opportunity to review the information yet, but we're comfortable we can address all of their concerns. A couple of the items that they requested were updates from Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine Historic Preservation. All of that information had been provided as part of the original subdivision. We're not anticipating any changes from those resource agencies. There hasn't been any Indian settlements located on the property since it was originally developed or anything. So we don't anticipate really anything changing from those resource letters, and we'd be happy to submit those as a condition of approval if that was acceptable to the board. Through their review, they did mention the high-intensity soil survey that you just had a lengthy discussion on the prior project. When this project was originally approved, the board did not require a high-intensity soil survey. We did not propose one as part of this addition of the 3-unit building, so we would be asking for a waiver of the requirement for a high-intensity soil survey. We have provided information regarding the proposed septic system, and these units would be served by public water. So given the intensity of the use, the availability and demonstration of the septic, and the fact that we will be on public water, we would request the waiver for the high-intensity soil survey. In addition to the proposed 3 units, there is a small garage proposed at the end of the last unit. That's for storage of lawnmower and other maintenance that is necessary for the 9 units. As you know, basically, as you enter Emerald Commons, you cross and go up the hill. This building is oriented parallel with Route 100, given the topography. In accordance with the design standards, there's only 1 row of parking between the building and the road, and we've been able to retain the majority of the existing vegetation between the development and the road to screen the development, and we've included a landscaping plan to supplement the existing vegetation. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've said that all of there's quite a list of concerns that, or comments from the review. So all of those have been addressed? Was that something that was sent?
We
was that
submitted.
sent this afternoon, or?
Yeah, we submitted it to the town late Friday afternoon.
Okay.
When the town hall's closed. But we believe we've addressed all the concerns. If there's anything that, once CV Maha reviews it, if they have any questions, we'd be happy to work with the planning staff and the town engineer to resolve any of the comments. We don't anticipate that there's any issues. They were mainly technical items, just relative to former rights-of-way and things that had been vacated that were still showing up on the plans.
Okay, thank you. But again, to be clear, so was some of that sent this afternoon that we can,
It was sent out this morning.
this morning? Okay,
and
because I didn't get back till late,
Yeah,
so,
and
okay.
it did address everything
Okay.
that the other
All right,
engineer
thank you,
asked.
Carla.
With the catch-all condition that we do about
Yeah.
that all comment to be addressed by the town engineer, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
We can
thank,
get it.
thank you. Questions, comments by the board members? Josh?
Carla, when is the high-intensity soil survey requirement triggered?
I thought Jim gave a really nice kind of graduate level course on.
No, that was good on what it does, but
Yeah.
would this project be, it's not showing up as a waiver, it didn't show up in your comments, that's fine. But do we need to do a waiver, or are we under some?
It was a comment from CV Mahar.
It was.
And then in the response to the comments, we highlighted the need for the waiver, and we requested the waiver based on the intensity of the development, the fact that it's being served by public water, and that we had provided evidence of suitable soils for wastewater disposal, that it would be still in compliance with the comprehensive plan and would not.
Did the engineer opine on?
You probably didn't
on
see
that
it
or
until
not?
today.
I would, if this is okay with, could you, thanks, Dan.
It's worked out well both times. We should have engineers all the time.
Al and I are going to get some banjos, and we'll just keep playing back and forth. No, I did get a chance to review the letter from Al that was submitted on Friday afternoon with his comment response, and everything he responded to was acceptable in my mind. And when it comes to the high intensity, the waiver for the high intensity soil survey, we would support that given the low density of development out here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dan, appreciate it. Any other questions, comments before we open the public hearing? Okay, at this time I will open the public hearing. No, okay. Is there anyone that would like to make comments that is in the room? Here's your chance. And again, if you're at home and want to ask questions or make comments, this is the time. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for discussion. Jason?
Carla, what's your feeling on this? I didn't get a chance to review the stuff from this morning, so I'm really uncomfortable. Last time I looked at this, I just saw not.
That's
and,
why I asked.
And I thought maybe this would just be tabled, and so I'm a little uncomfortable now, not being able to dig into
As I
this.
was doing the findings at that point, this was Thursday, so I didn't get the comments till, well, I got them Monday.
Yep.
Christina wasn't in yesterday, so she couldn't upload them
Yep.
to the websites till today. So at that time I was doing the findings, I was saying, no, 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 no. But I think that I've read through the letter. I think that the items have been addressed. I'm confident that with the conditions of approval that say that the town engineer agree that the responses have addressed his concerns, that it's something that could be looked at for approval tonight.
So there's no
For site
remaining
plan.
issues, Dan, in your mind?
Well, the few letters that Al mentioned requested a condition for IFW, Municipal and Marine Engineers, those would be a condition.
Other comments or questions, Bill?
I reviewed the letter and compared it to the findings of fact that we had, and I believe they were all covered. I checked each one of them off, and I believe they've got it covered.
Thank you, Bill. Lorraine, you have?
No, I'm good.
No?
Thank you.
Ann? Josh?
Does that include the MDOT? Do we need a revised entrance permit?
I didn't get a response to that. Did you respond to my comment about whether a revised entrance permit is required?
I didn't see that comment, so.
Oh, it's up there under planner's comment, sorry.
Okay.
They gloss over that, Carla. You're not an
They
engineer.
do. I'm going to put P after my name.
There you go.
Because that's perfect.
If nothing else, it'll drive Bill Shane crazy.
That would, but I think both Dan and I would support that.
We can do it as a condition of approval, as far as I'm.
You would probably know right off. It's 3 more units.
I believe it was originally granted as an entrance permit, not a driveway permit, and if that was the case, then it would not require amendment, but we can verify that and provide evidence to the town prior to construction.
And was it your information about Portland Water District changing the way, so it's gonna have to be a condition of approval and an as an as-built
Correct.
capacity to serve? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the only waiver is the high end, the soil. So do that next. Is there a
Sure.
motion?
I will make a motion that due to the unique characteristics of this project and the property, that we waive the requirement for a high-intensity soil survey.
Second?
Bill seconded. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. So, findings of fact. So, I have to, before I start, there were many not. So, read them as written? Or do I need to
We're gonna have to amend a lot of them, but we can work
just
through
read it as is?
it. There's a
for-
lot of them, because some of them certainly, like these first couple are gonna be pending the,
What
condition of
the
approval.
finding would be is, yes, based on the proposed condition of approval, the board finds this section has been met. So that's how you'd work your way through them.
Okay, the first is pollution, which looks good. The parcel is not located in a 100-year floodplain. The test pit information for subsurface wastewater disposal has been reviewed and found satisfactory. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Sufficient water will be public. A letter from the PWD, Portland Water District, indicating there is sufficient water for the needs of the subdivision is required. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not been met, but will be a condition of approval. Municipal water supply, a letter from PWD indicating that the proposed units will not cause an unreasonable burden on the existing water supply is required. The standards of this section have not been met, but will be based on a condition of approval. Erosion, the site is generally flat, well-drained sandy soils. The town engineer has requested several changes to the plan.
I'd just do the same thing.
All the way through.
because we've got.
Yeah, based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not been met, but will be dealt with a condition of approval. Traffic, the increase from 6 to 9 residential units should not create unsafe road conditions. However, an updated MDOT entrance permit may be needed and updated traffic study information be provided. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not yet been met, but will be dealt with a condition of approval. Sewage disposal, the plans show the location of the septic area. Test pit data is included. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Municipal solid waste disposal, there will be no dumpster. Trash will be stored inside units. Information on whether the town or a commercial waste hauler collects the trash will be determined. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not been met, but will have a condition of approval. Aesthetic, cultural, and natural values, updated letters from state agencies are required. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not yet been met, but will have a condition of approval. Conformity with local ordinances and plans, the plan is not in conformance with the town's ordinance as indicated in this review. Additional information is required. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have not yet been met, but will have a condition of approval. Financial and technical capacity, the applicant has provided a letter dated 4/2021 from Biddeford Savings indicating that the application has the financial capacity and wherewithal to complete the proposed project. A statement of values and a performance guarantee will be provided prior to the pre-construction conference. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Surface waters, outstanding river segments. Wetlands have been delineated on the plans. The proposed development will not adversely affect the wetland areas. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Groundwater, the proposed development will utilize public water. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Flood areas, according to the National Flood Insurance Program's flood insurance rate map 2301620015B, the property is located in floodplain overlay C areas of minimal flooding. No special precautions are necessary in Zone C. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. Stormwater, the applicant has provided a stormwater management report that has been reviewed by the town engineer. Minor modifications are needed. Based on the information, the standards of this section have not yet been met, but will have a condition of approval. Freshwater wetlands. Wetlands have been identified on the plans, and building envelopes and driveways have been drawn to avoid impacting them. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met. River, stream, or brook. No rivers, streams, or brooks have been found on the site. Based on the information provided, the standards of this section have been met.
Sorry, I was flipping through and looking at something. 10.7. Was a vacant site, there appear to be no Maine Historic Preservation Commission is required. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. I had a comment. It says it's listed as a proposed condition of approval. It's not currently, but it will be. Okay.
Could I make a,
Yes, go ahead, Caroline.
so this is a project that, under our ordinance,
You're talking about section 10?
Reviews require subdivision approval, site plan approval, because it's a commercial property. Our town attorney has informed me that that is no longer required, that you do both reviews because so many of the items are duplications of one another. I have made findings for all of them, and so that we have them. You're going to find the same types of language about it's not here, it's
I
not
did.
here. All the conditions. In the past, the planning board has chosen to waive the reading of findings for things that are duplicated like this. I'm just suggesting that as an option if you wish.
All right, so you're talking about section 10 for site plan ordinances that continued after. Does the board, anyone on the board have a comment or a problem with waiving reading, which very similar language?
Oh, okay, no, but let's,
Need a motion, I'm sure.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the findings of fact for subdivision ordinance
Okay.
as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second it?
Bill, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you.
The only problem we're gonna have with waiving these is a lot of these things that say not been met are gonna be subject to a condition of approval.
Not waiving them, waiving the reading
Reading.
of them. But I think
But the-
we will capture everything in the conditions.
Make a motion that we waive the reading of the findings of fact.
For the site plan ordinances.
The site plan ordinance.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So you know what we're
Yep.
discussing, okay? All those in favor?
Can you repeat it?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Sure, I make a motion that we waive the reading of the proposed findings of fact for the site plan ordinance.
Was a second. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. So for conditions of
Well, now we gotta,
Yeah, we've gotta-
now we gotta adopt them. I'll try this one. I'll make a motion that we adopt the finding of fact for site plan ordinance subject to various proposed conditions of approval to address those standards not currently met.
Sounds good. Amanda seconded. All those in favor? All right, thank you, Josh. Now conditions.
All right. So, Carla, this is the one I like, that a performance guarantee in an amount acceptable. Number
Right, but
3.
This is coming now for like a final approval. That
Right, I'm just saying that for the prior project, this is the financial
Okay.
piece that is probably more important. And
I see.
And the letter from Biddeford Savings isn't even a commitment letter. It's I think this sounds good and I'm gonna submit it, but we'll see what happens. But I'm fine with this as long as the performance guarantee is presented, that's fine. Then somebody's on the hook for it. So I think we need to add, so I'm good with all those 5. I think we need to add receipt of approvals as required from MDOT. Do we need anything from MDEP? I'm sure we do. We always do, but maybe not in this case. Okay. Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Maine Historical, Department of Maine Historical Preservation, and Department of Conservation. And I think separately we need to say, receipt of Portland Water District capacity to serve subject to submission of as-builts. I mean, this is where it gets weird, is the project, they have to build it out before they can even,
No, they're gonna need it for building permit.
It's relative to the sprinkler design. The sprinkler design,
okay, so it's not as-built, it's.
no, would be a
okay,
design build
Okay,
contractor, and Andy hasn't hired the contractor yet. So once they proceed to the design build, then he can get final sign-off from Portland Water District. We can give that
okay.
to the
Sorry,
town.
I thought it was,
and draw the
I thought
building
it was
permit.
as-built, but,
No,
okay.
just,
So, subject to, and then, so that, 6 was all, did we lump all the other ones into 6? Or did you do separate conditions for each?
Yes, they're all.
Agency.
No, they're all together.
Okay.
Not together.
So, capacity to serve from Portland Water District, 7. And then we also need municipal solid waste. It's not gonna place an unreasonable burden on municipal.
private waste hauling.
That's what
Okay, so,
with the commercial.
Oh, I'm sorry. They bring the,
6 roll house right now, we'll have another 3, they roll them down to the corner of Gray Road.
so what is that?
Municipal trash collection, so you don't have to make a condition.
Well, we do because we have it, otherwise we gotta go back and adjust the findings of fact. Because right now, we have it subject, it's not, the standards have not been met, subject
You're
to
right, and we don't have
proposed
the one
condition of
about
approval. So all we need to do is do a conditional approval that it will be served by municipal
Waste disposal.
waste disposal. So is that 8 or 9? Do I hear 10?
So all of the engineers, all of Dan's comments were covered, not needing additional conditions?
Nope, that's in number 5.
Okay.
That all comments made by the town engineer.
Okay.
Oh, we should amend
All
that. And the town planner.
Thank you.
All comments made by the town engineer and the town planner be addressed prior to the pre-construction plan. So how many do we have right now?
I mean, what do you-
8.
Okay.
Came up with the same number.
I make a motion that we approve amendments to site plan and subdivision approvals to allow for an additional 3 residential apartment units within one 3,312 square foot single-story building at 5 Emerald Drive, tax assessor map U21 Lot 1, subject to the limitation of approval, the standard condition of approval, and the 8 recommended conditions of approval.
Is there a second? Yes, there's a second. All those in favor of the motion? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, next item is a pre-application presentation for a proposed 50-unit residential condominium building to be located at 100 US Route 1. The 3.16 acre parcel is shown on tax assessor map RO1 Lot 13 in the Office Commercial South Retail Restaurant Multiplex Dwelling Mixed Use Overlay District. Owner David Spellman, represented by Dan Diffin, PE, Sevi and Maher Engineers. Welcome. You're not Dan.
Claire and members of the planning board, thank you for hearing me. My name is Dave Spellman. I'm the property owner, which may be a little unusual. But first off, I'll start by saying I have the experience over 30 years of being on about 7 nonprofit boards, chair of each, so I get it. Meetings can be sessions where minutes are taken and hours can be wasted. So I'll try not to waste your time and be efficient because obviously you've got a lot of matters to deal with you. I've lived in the town of Cumberland for most of my life, and for decades, I'd really wanted to have my office here, and I was focusing on Route 1, and we bought the property at 100 US Route 1 about 10 years ago. And then discovered some complexity, mainly just getting a driveway into the site was difficult, and became very apparent very quickly that the best use of that spot would be some type of multiplex building. Therein, a problem presented itself, and some of you were here and a member of the board, and I worked with the town manager, the planning department, and then ultimately this planning board at the time, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago, and then the council to develop the zone overlay that we now have. And what we came up with, that there was a mismatch between the zone and the allowed density and all the use of it. And to put it simply, it was a commercial zone with residential zoning. It just wasn't really workable. So I thought getting that zone overlay would be the hard part. Let's just say I underestimated the second part, which is finding someone who could actually do this. So I just want to strike a note that it was a successive time, and I think I came to the planning department, Carla, and Bill Shane, and said, here's an idea, and it just, there was never anything that gelled. But I think this really has, and it's a great answer because I live in a community that I love, and I know a lot of people who do, and here's the problem. A lot of people would love to be able to downsize, but they don't want to leave the town that we love, and there's no place to go. And my own children that have grown up here would love to come back. They've gone away to get educated and so forth, went to school here and grew up here all their lives, and just look at the dynamic of buying in. And this is about the only way that someone of fairly average means could even think about it. So I don't pretend that this is all the answers, but I think I've got at least a start and a blazing trail to do this. With that, I'll leave all the technical comments to the experts, but I want to thank you for your time and your consideration. I think this is really going to be a great project and a tribute here for the town. Thank you. And Dan, you want to take over?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Dan Diffin, CV Mahar Engineers, if you don't remember me from a minute ago. We also have Travis Nadeau here from Platts Associates. He's the architect on the project. And he'll share some pretty cool pictures with you later on here. So we do have what is essentially a very tough site to develop. It's adjacent to the Ledgeview Nursing Home, if you're familiar with it. It's about 3 acres. It is in the Office Commercial South Overlay Zone that Dave mentioned, which definitely adjusted the net residential acreage. Basically, we're not required to do that calc. We can fit what we can fit out there, assuming we can get the right amount of parking and fit within the rest of the standards, height being one of those. You'll see on the next, a couple of considerations here: undeveloped forest, some pretty extreme slopes in different areas. We have a forested wetland and a stream that runs along Route 1 that's going to be a challenge. And then if I can get rid of this little thing, it's a 100-foot beautification strip along 295. This is kind of just a quick overview of those constraints. Here's the stream. Here's the 100-foot strip that we can't touch along 295. We can't even cut a tree in there, technically. And then we're constrained to the south by this is Ledgeview Assisted Living. And over here we have some residential properties. So we're trying to fit our a substantial enough development to make it worth it in this area to provide up to 50 units of high-end condominiums on this property in a very small area. So kind of, I would say as well, we have a 30-foot elevation drop from right around here to the beautification strip as well, which is a real challenge. We'll get into in more detail later on in the process, but it's what I do when I'm bored, is engineer that. Anyway, 5-story, 50-unit condominium building. We're going to meet that 50-foot height requirement. We're going to be like 49 feet, 6 inches or so. We'll be right under it, we promise. We're still refining that, but we're very close. 20-foot wide paved driveway off of Route 1. With the 50 units, we expect there to be a peak hour increase of 30 trips per hour, which doesn't trigger a traffic movement permit or significant review through DOT. We are going through that process with them right now to make sure we get their review on a driveway entrance permit. The requirement in this zone for parking is 1.5 per unit, which would put us at 75 parking spaces. But we met with the town, and the developer has a real interest in providing as close to 2 spaces per unit as we can get. And it sounded like that was something the town would support as well. So you'll see in our plan that we provided that. Public utilities from Route 1, we're lucky to have public sewer. The town just extended that public sewer down to Ledgeview Assisted Living a couple years ago. So we can connect into that by running a couple 100-foot connection along Route 1. We'll also have public water available. There's a 20-inch water main out there on Route 1, which is pretty easy. We're talking with the natural gas folks with Summit to see if they have a line in the area, and if we can access that. We have a meeting tomorrow to talk through that. And then, of course, CNP. We met with the fire chief to talk about access to the site yesterday. He was very helpful and had some very specific requirements for getting a ladder truck down to the rear of the building. So here's a snapshot of our development. You can see Route 1 over here, our stream crossing for our driveway entrance. And if you're familiar with the site at all, it's a relatively flat from Route 1 to a ridge line sort of along the center line of the building, and then it drops off pretty quick. And that's where we get that 25, 30 foot of grade change. It's essentially from here down to this piece of the beautification strip. So to sort of play with that, we've built this site in tiers. We're going to have a kind of a high tier here where our visitor parking and our accessible parking spaces will go. And we'll drop down to a mid-level tier as we get down to sort of the south piece of the property. And then we'll swing around to the west and it'll drop down even further. And as part of the tiered site development out here, we're proposing, I believe it's 23 or 24 spaces at the bottom level of the building. So we're going to have under building parking, essentially. And that is really what's allowing us to get to our 100 spaces without having to do some costly exterior parking garage that wouldn't look good and would be sort of a challenge to build as well. One of the items we had to address with the abutting property owner is, you can see there's an existing property line here. We've met with David Landa, who owns Ledgeview Assisted Living, to talk about trying to grab some additional property to get those 100 spaces or as close as we can get, and also give us some setback. There's a 15-foot parking setback requirement from all property lines. We've been able to work with him and negotiate this transfer of property. It's in a purchase and sale agreement now, ready to be executed upon permit approvals and the project moving forward. That was actually a big challenge for us early on, is that Ledgeview's septic system is essentially right here, and they had an easement for a plume on the property that's now been discontinued. So we've been able to grab that additional property, which has really made this project even more viable. I mentioned the 50 units, the 5 stories. We do have some preliminary stormwater areas noted on the plans here that we're still working through that final design. That'll be part of the process. We don't have to go to DEP for a stormwater management permit on this. We're at less than 1 acre of impervious area. We've been able to keep it under that threshold. We'll have to go to them for a permit by rule because we are going to be disturbing more than 1 area, and we'll have to have a stream crossing permit for our driveway. And then you can see that this development is pretty close to that stream. We're within the 75 feet that requires a permit by rule as well, but we're outside of the 25 feet, which will require an individual permit. So we've really threaded the needle here. It's been really a good challenge for us. If only they were also fun and challenging. I mentioned the utilities. Pedestrian access around the site is really going to be tiered as well. It's difficult to provide accessible pedestrian access around the entire site, given that we're going to be dropping at 5 and 10% at times throughout this parking lot. Generally, we're trying to keep the parking spaces at 5%, which is more of a tolerable slope for folks to park, and then making up 10% in some of these small drive areas here. So you notice sort of the disconnected sidewalks. The access into the below building parking will be in two sections here. This will be a little bit higher up than this one, but they'll all be able to get in under and park comfortably. This is where our ladder truck access is going to be. We had 100 spaces, and then we met with the fire chief, and we got down to 98. That's usually what happens with fire chiefs, but Chief Small was very easy to work with and gave us some really great information to base our design off of. So ladder truck can come in, the truck can back up into here and then come back out, so he's got full access to the back of the site, which is a big deal. The building will be sprinkled, obviously 5 stories, 50 units it needs to be. So we'll be facing the same challenge that Al faced with the PWD as we get through that process. So that's sort of an overview of the site. Here's the other permits we need. I think I've mentioned most of them, the DOT, stormwater permit by rule, the NERPA. And Travis does have some quick comments to make on some of the architectural elements out there for the Route 1 design guidelines. So I'll turn it over to him and then we can have some questions.
Thanks, Dan. Travis Netto with Platts Associates. For the Route Run design corridor, I think the biggest item was the breakdown of the massing for these larger buildings, and also the integration of the traditional vernacular, the roof elements, the entries, and trying to find materiality, shingle sidings. We're investigating a stone base to help layer and break up the volume. Repetitive forms. We have some undulations within the walls as well, so there's some setbacks within the building, 6 feet. It helps to break up hallways internally so that there's a little more personalization within the building, but it also helps break up the building forms outside as well. The effect of the height requirement is that the building, even though the site steps down, there is an allowance for the building to step down with it and maintain that 50-foot height requirement. So the roof is at one level, and that 50-foot average grade will be achieved from that throughout the entire perimeter. So on this side of the building, we'll be revealing what it will be largely a 4-story type look, and then I think we could move around the corner. So this is coming down the site, and you can see how the grades transition through here to our rear entrance, which would be serving that lower lot. And then there's a center corridor that would have exits on either end at grade, and with a short sidewalk that takes you to those to the parking field at the center bit here. Again, the idea is to offer porches, double hung windows in a sort of standard vertical arrangement. The materiality is shingle siding or some sort of lap siding, painted likely, painted trims. We went for a deep profile in our overhangs to try to, again, extend that sort of traditional vernacular to this project. And we're still refining some of the exterior design elements. For example, I'm targeting this for removal. Some of these sort of wing forms on roof, that is not traditional, and so we would seek to sort of maybe streamline some of those elements, and it helps heighten some of the other pieces that are happening in those areas. So using the design guidelines as our sort of guide through our refinement process, try to swing around the side. So here's our underground parking. When we present again for you folks, we'll have some integrated lighting and photometrics to share with you, how we're going to really try to accentuate these entries, help with wayfinding, help folks safely negotiate the site. We talked about integrating some open space pathways so that there could be some connectivity throughout the site, so that if you wanted to do a local sort of walk, you could around the building. There isn't any connectivity along Route 1, but we thought that might be a nice add. And then here's sort of the Route 1 facade, as it were, but it's, as you would see it, obscured by 100 feet of trees. So it's going to be hard to really see a lot of this facade at one time. So that was our effort, to sort of bring these smaller scale design elements to break up these larger facades. Adds to personalization of the units, and help integrate this which is a really tough site. That parking level is a real help with the project. The last slide I'd like to finish with is this one. This is sort of the entry, the money shot. This is our visitor parking, our front entrance, indicated by the entry here. The various roof forms and direction, the orientation we were consciously shifting to face face the street and to face all these different areas. There really isn't a back to this building, so we tried to, accommodate all the various frontages around. That's kind of a consequence of tucking the parking around the back and under, but, I think that's a really awesome thing that's embedded in the design standards that this site seemed to couch well. So I think with that, I'll stop and
Yeah, thank you.
questions. Thank you.
Dan, what's your expectation on when you would be back to the board with the next step?
We plan to submit on next Tuesday with our application package. So
Really?
we expect to
Wow.
see you June 15th, I think, is the next planning board meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Pending any major feedback tonight, of course.
Yeah. Looks like an incredible project.
That's great feedback. All right, good. Approved, yeah. No.
Any questions or comments?
Can you tell us about the typical unit, what it'll look like, square footage inside, and what's your plan for target resident there?
It's a mix of 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom units, open floor plan, island kitchens. Each one will have a terrace or porch of some kind. The rooftop units, there's 8 units at the rooftop that'll have an enlarged porch, and likely we're taking a look at maybe making those 3 bedrooms up there, take advantage of some of the envelope that we have. So that'd be a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3s, which is a nice thing to do if you can. And then the parking, again, we're looking at that higher ratio for the parking. As far as the interiors, every unit would have a upgraded, I wouldn't say lavish, but a luxury appointment, crown moldings, upscale cabinetry, wood floors, that sort of thing. It's a condo, it's envisioned as a condo type project, so I imagine there'd be some degree of customization within the interiors for clients' wishes for, clawfoot tubs and stuff like that that can be accommodated within reason. And then the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms would bring in either a half bath or a full bath, depending. And the target market is a little bit like Dave said, maybe folks from the area that are looking to downsize, folks that are looking for an opportunity to come to Maine. It's such a great location, convenient to jobs in Portland and fun, around the state. It's near the water. I mean, I think it'd be incredibly attractive to a wide range of folks. And the parking scenario, I think, is a big piece of the solve here. I think a lot of times the larger housing projects suffer from a lack of parking. And so I think the 2-space will make it a viable option for a wider range of folks. This won't just be empty nesters and retirees necessarily. More active lifestyles would be able to park 2 cars, have 2 jobs, and make this work.
So it will be straight private ownership. Each person would own their, rather than an organized, something like what Ocean View's doing.
Right.
Just direct sales.
I don't know the specifics of this necessarily.
Now, well, it's just
but,
curious, and we'll find that out later.
Oftentimes, they sometimes don't necessarily get sold on the first day, so sometimes there's some management that leaks in until they're all sold. So it's envisioned as a residential condo project.
Thank you. Josh?
Are there going to be any common amenities, gym, meeting room?
Yep. So we have a gym, a meeting room, 2 interior bike rooms planned, and at the moment we're deciding whether there's going to be a common laundry or if we're going to provide hookups in all the units to provide for that. Other than it's got elevator access, of course, and I think that's about it for amenities.
And Dan, you're looking at the two parking spots per unit as a marketing kind of piece, not, I mean, you're just required 1.5.
Requirement is 1.5, yeah, at this point, in this zone.
Great.
Anyone else? Ann?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm happy to see a project like this come to Cumberland, and I think it's a nice use of the land on Route 100.
I'll second that. We desperately need inventory, so looking forward to see how it develops.
Good. Thank you very much.
Can I ask just one
Yeah.
question before I sign off here? Carla, you mentioned earlier, last week we had talked about this being a subdivision and site plan application. It sounds like that is shifted to just a site plan application now?
Let me check with the town attorney.
Okay. Proceed, okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time
Thank
tonight,
you
and we'll
very
see soon.
much. Thank you, and best of luck with it. The next item is a public hearing, and it's a recommendation to the town council on an amendment to section 250 subdivision of land for 1, section 250-3 definitions, to add a definition of sketch plan review, and 2, section 2517A, to remove a requirement for the sketch plan step from the major subdivision review process when a planning board workshop, as per section 25014B, has been held. And Carla, do you have a plan on this, or do you just want,
I think the memo that I dated April 5th, that's in your packet, really outlines the need for this amendment change. And you've experienced it this month and last month when we had to go through the same kind of review twice. So unless you have any questions, I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
do we need to read the language, or not?
Ann has
Ann
something
has
though. Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I don't think, and I could be totally wrong here. Okay, I could be totally wrong here, but I don't think that the new language at the end of sketch plan review addresses a situation like with the, let me see, it's the Ross Estates. Because they were, they came to us previously, and we told them, you have to be a conservation subdivision. But then they had to come back, because they didn't give us a subdivision, a conservation subdivision example. So they came back this time with basically a sketch plan, right?
No,
It was a sketch plan.
No,
yes.
They had a conservation.
Yeah, they had to
Right.
do both.
I don't think they,
At
well,
the
maybe they
workshop, they
did, but
presented both.
still, they were back with a sketch plan. And so I think you maybe just need a little additional language. And like I said, I could be wrong, but where sketch plan review is not required when the type of subdivision plan, because they did have to come back with a sketch plan, has been, and I would add, previously presented and agreed to in a planning board workshop as per section, et cetera.
Potato, potato. I think it's fine, whichever.
Sorry, I'm not seeing how that
Yeah, I mean,
drastically differs from what's
well,
here.
because this one says sketch plan review is not required when the type of subdivision plan has been determined.
In a
And so
planning
for
board
Ross
workshop.
Estates, we had determined it, but yet they still had to come back with a sketch plan.
Because the language
Requires it. That's
required
what
it.
this
That's
is
why we're
fixing.
changing the language.
So every subdivision in the rural residential 1 and 2 goes through the checklist that's on this
Right,
page.
right. Mhm.
What our ordinance does is it you figure out in the planning planning board workshop, whether it's gonna be what kind of style of subdivision. And then they should start going into preliminary review, but we have this extraneous step of sketch plan review.
Right.
The purpose of which, in our ordinance, is to determine whether the traditional or clustered design is better. So the purpose of the sketch plan's already been met in the planning board workshop, and that's all I'm trying to do is get rid of that section, that requirement.
Okay.
Regardless, forget about Ross's, any of the specific ones. The reality is our ordinance says, these are the steps you have to go through. And it's unnecessary to make them pay their engineers and.
Right, but Ross Estates did. They came back, and I think they gave us a pretty sketchy sketch plan for the conservation
I'm not
subdivision the
remembering
first time.
But plus at the time, the language, we didn't know ourselves. I mean, we did an extra step because we hadn't eliminated the need yet. That hadn't occurred.
Right, and if
So-
I mean, and we always have the ability to send them back. I mean, to say, no, we're not, your plan isn't sufficient. We can't make a decision based on, you need to go away and come back and present a better conservation. Just because we have a workshop, we don't have to make a decision at that workshop. The decision can be, go back, rework your plans, and then represent.
Okay, but we did make a decision.
Correct, but the language hadn't been changed, Dan.
So we,
The language that they were, when
Working.
they brought their project forward, they had to do a workshop and they had to do a sketch plan per the language in the ordinance. That's why we're proposing to change the language of the ordinance. So if they go through a workshop, they then would not have to go through a sketch plan process.
Okay, I'm just saying, we had we had the Blanchard, and they clearly, I mean, when they showed up at our last meeting, it did seem unnecessary, and that's why we decided to make this change. Because they showed up at the preliminary workshop with a very complete sketch plan, and we all agreed, they agreed that they would be a conservation subdivision. And so then coming back last month with the sketch plan seemed unnecessary. And it was. I mean, and this is a good change. But then there was the Ross subdivision, which had a sketchier sketch plan when they showed up the first time. They didn't show up last month. And then, but they came back this time with a very complete sketch plan for the conservation subdivision.
I don't remember the
Jason has
plan
something.
being any different.
Jason, go ahead.
I don't, at first I was like, well, this is easy, yes, because both of these that we just gone through were very awkward. It was just like, yep, we said you were good, yep, you're still good. It was weird. But to Ann's point, I think maybe it does make sense because the verbiage of workshops sort of implies less formality. And you would potentially have an example where really it was just in the very early stages and they weren't as prepared. So maybe to her point, we should add something that says, has been determined, and add a technicality in there where in that workshop we said you are able to forego the sketch plan phase. Just put it in the original workshop. This is sketch plan isn't needed because it was ample. But if it wasn't presented in a formal enough way, then we want to still keep that next step in there.
Yeah, and I disagree. Having sat through the Conservation Subdivision Committee work, you don't get beyond planning board workshop until you've provided either a straight-up conservation plan that everyone agrees, yeah, that's the way to go, or if you want to argue for a traditional plan, you present both of them, and the planning board at that workshop picks one and says, this is what you're going to do. These are your marching orders. Come back. You're going to do a conservation. The next step for them shouldn't be coming in for sketch plan review, because we've already decided this is the way you're going to go.
Okay.
The next step should be preliminary review.
But they did. They came, there were just a sketch plan review
But
process.
but at the time, my understanding is that at the time, we didn't have this language. It says right here, the new language, sketch plan review is not required when the type of subdivision, et cetera. Back then, back 3 months ago, we didn't have that language.
And
So
a sketch
that's why we
plan
did
was
it that
required.
way.
Okay, so then are you saying that the next time around, if you have a Ross situation, that they would not have to come back for a sketch plan review?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they.
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
So,
okay,
Um,
then
so could I ask a question, Carl? Next page on the flow chart, on the right side, there's, from all districts other than R1 and R2, there's an arrow down to minor and sketch plan, and then major is down below with, how does that connect to anything? I mean, can we have, there's no arrow.
There's an arrow missing.
Oh, okay.
It should be an arrow from sketch plan review.
Okay, all right.
down to major.
Good, all right, very good.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
It just,
I think
it
I
was
didn't
kind of
know
lonely
how to
there,
do
yeah.
that, and I was waiting for Christina
Yeah.
to help.
In the end, haven't we,
Copy paste,
haven't we ended
Carla,
up with
copy
the
paste.
same number of steps?
Hey,
No,
Carla,
workshop and then right to the next.
No, I know, but from what we originally had, like before this conservation subdivision existed, haven't we now, once we implement this, gotten to the same number of steps and all we did was rename sketch plan review to planning board workshop?
well, except now in
Yes,
here's,
except
Pretty
the-
much,
the
yeah.
The conservation subdivision ordinance was carefully crafted, and I will tell you that
Yeah.
at the ordinance meeting we had yesterday, Mike Schwint came back and he's still tweaking it. He still thinks
Okay.
that there's language that should be even more specific. But the bottom line is this planning board workshop is where all the good stuff happens. You see the topography, you see the natural resources, you see the layout of the road. Does this work?
Yep. So you never see an example where it would be at a point that it couldn't move right to the next step. Like there's no need ever to have the sketch plan review again. I mean,
well,
it's
that's
replacing
not,
it.
right now, there's still sketch plan review in R1, in districts other than R1
No, I
and
know. I'm
R2.
talking about R1, R2.
No, I don't see why there would be a need, because the purpose, if you look at the ordinance, the purpose of sketch plan review
Yep.
used to be, show us your two plans and we'll tell you which one to go off. We do that in the workshop.
I know. I just think we've renamed it and implemented the
Yeah, but it
conservation
does-
stuff to it.
I think to the credit of the committee, that it gives you a little more flexibility and discussion around a table. Yeah, it's not, it's not totally informal, but I think it's quite different than sitting up here. We're not sitting up here, we're down there with, we can talk about it.
Yeah,
Carl, I think it was a good idea.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Carla, number one, my big question is, should we do sketch plan review for everything? Whether it's R1 or R2, I'm sorry, not sketch plan review, planning board workshop for everything. If not, and that's okay, but right now, you've got sketch plan review is not required when this type of subdivision, i.e. conservation, clustered, or traditional. You gotta take clustered out. Clustered isn't
Right.
an option
That still says that.
in non-R, in R1 or R2, and we're only doing planning board workshops in R1 or R2.
You're right.
Also, your references, 250-13B is, I don't think that's where, I think planning board workshop is,
250
14B, isn't it?
no, I think you just get to check all those section references. Like
Okay.
250-15, I don't think is, that's procedure for subdivisions not located in the R1, R2. So the section
All right,
references
I will
are not
double-check those.
accurate. But in the grander picture, and I'm fine doing this in iterative process. I'm not sure why we're limiting planning board workshops to only subdivisions in the R1 and RR2. When we could do the same thing in other districts, it would just be a cluster versus a conservation. But I'm fine fine with this as an iterative step towards that.
I'm not following you, Josh.
Well, right
So
now,
if-
if you have a subdivision in R1 or R2,
Yes.
you come to a planning board workshop.
Correct.
But if you have a subdivision, if you're doing it in another district,
All
you
districts
do not
other
go through a
than-
planning board workshop, and we're subject to the same sketch plan review process, which we've already decided is more limited than what we get out of the planning board workshop. So if a developer wanted to do a planning board workshop because he wanted more input from community members and the planning board and others than he would get in a sketch plan review, why don't we allow them to do a planning board workshop and then skip
Then
sketch
we'd
plan
have to go
review?
back and change, I think.
I understand, and I'm not
Could-
saying we're gonna solve that. I'm just saying tonight.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
saying that in the grand scheme
I-
of things,
I
why?
think, Josh, it's a good question.
Why-
It's a
why
great
don't we let
question.
anyone
But I
who
think the
wants it to
reason is when we wrote the ordinance for the conservation, we put it in there.
Right,
But
and
it
we just
hasn't
never
been put in.
expanded it.
hasn't been-
That's the answer. I'm throwing this out there as a down the road, not
Yeah.
tonight.
Okay, so we need any other critical thinking questions or comments about this? So we need a motion.
Uh,
It's
I'm,
just a recommendation.
you're right. I make a motion that we recommend to the town council an amendment as amended tonight to section 250 subdivision of land for section 250-3 definitions to add a definition of sketch plan review, and 2, section 25-17A to remove requirement for the sketch plan step from the major subdivision review process when a planning board workshop as per section 250-14B, and that is right, be held, and C, that we further amend the section 250-12-.1 flow chart.
I hear a second?
Second?
All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Okay, the next item. What, Christina?
Oh.
You see it? It's there again.
There's a public hearing.
This is a public hearing.
Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
There's
Oh,
no
shoot.
one in the room, and there's no one
yes,
in
and I
Zoom, so-
apologize, I did not offer to have the public make comments. I do that at this time, and I don't believe anyone is queued up, so I will close the public hearing, and we'll move on to the last item. Next item is a public hearing for a recommendation of the town council on an amendment to section 229 site plan review, section 2-C-3 to amend the minor staff review column to indicate 5 acres or less. And this is a minor change in a table. That any discussion or comments by
Does,
any of the board members? Yeah, yes.
doesn't that still not?
Yes,
Yeah,
does.
it did. So we need to amend the amendment.
Something got missed here in translation.
It-
It should be
5 acres or
5
less.
acres or less.
Or less.
And the other one should be greater than 5 acres. So I don't know how to.
Yes.
Thank you, Jason.
It doesn't say.
No. Right, it
Say
says
5
exactly, I
acre-
think,
says
what it said
exactly
the
what we
last
had
time.
before.
We can do this again next month.
Oh.
No.
Should we have a
Um,
motion to table?
Killing me
So
smalls.
there is, so we have that corrected,
As-
and
It should be as amended, 5 acres or less.
I will,
Yeah.
I will open the public hearing on this minor change.
What if it's 5 acres?
Seeing no interest, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for either comments or a motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to town council to make an amendment to section 229 site plan review, section 2.C.3, to amend the minor staff review column to indicate 5 acres or less.
I second it.
Thank you, Bill. There was a second.
No
Uh,
discussion.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. So the next item is administrative matters or new business. Nothing, Jason? No follow-up?
Any missives to read?
Well, I was gonna ask Bill for an
Manifesto.
update. I didn't see the last council meeting. I didn't know if there was any update on that, talk of updating surveys and that sort of thing, growth reports and stuff, but
So,
he's not
Well, we
here.
got a GP cog.
so there are no site walks coming up, right? Because we talked about that 2 meetings ago, and, okay. So is there any discussion, any new business from anyone? Any motion from anyone?
Motion to adjourn?
I second it.
All those in favor? Thank you. We almost made it to